She faced more than her fair share of struggles in life.
She lived a life that had many obstacles.
She lost a child. She also suffered from a physical disability.
But she was finally picking up the pieces.
She was not discouraged. She continued to work hard.
She seems to be doing better.
She was looking for love.
The future looked bright until a breaking news story changed everything.
Her child was found wandering in the street.
Everyone's asking, where is Nicole?
Something's not right.
This is more than a missing child. This is a missing person.
Did her search for love lead her down a dangerous road?
They're wondering, did she meet up with the wrong guy?
Why do you keep calling them?
Because he's not answering.
She was being secretive about it.
Just thinking about doing something, not sure about.
Come to find out, he's given a fake phone number.
The investigation will draw detectives into the darkest corners of their city. But will the truth ever see the light of day?
Days turns into weeks. Weeks turn into months.
I searched for her everywhere.
Go be a man.
She gonna have some justice. Oh my God.
He's pure evil.
December 12th, 2016, Detroit, Michigan, a city once known as the heart of America's automotive industry, is undergoing a renaissance.
The city of Detroit it's Motown, right? It's the Motor City.
Going back several years, we had, the auto crisis, the recession. We had this housing crisis.
Around 2016, Detroit started seeing better days. Companies started moving back. There was a lot of energy.
The city is really on the comeback now.
Longtime Detroit resident Conrad Green has lived through all the city's ups and downs. But nothing could prepare him for what he experienced on that cold Monday morning.
My wife and I were sitting, looking at television, looking at the news as we normally do. And my wife got a call.
Yes, speaking.
And it was the Genesis House. Genesis House was a transition house for homeless women.
Conrad's granddaughter, Nicole Smith, was temporarily living there with her son, Isaiah.
They're saying Nicole and Isaiah aren't at the home.
What? Hold on.
Just then, Conrad sees a shocking news bulletin flash across the TV screen.
Simultaneously, I saw Isaiah on the television.
The photo is shown of his great-grandchild, Isaiah, who's only 18 months old. He's instantly concerned.
According to the newscaster, Isaiah had been found wandering the streets of Detroit's west side all on his own.
Thankfully, the young boy is now safe.
Isaiah was dropped off at a fire station by a Good Samaritan.
Conrad immediately springs into action.
So he contacts the local police precinct that's holding Isaiah, and he says, hey, this is my great-grandchild. He rushes down there.
Along the way, Conrad and his wife try to reach their granddaughter, Nicole, by phone.
They're frantically trying to get a hold of her, and they can't.
I continued to call Nicole, and I used the firm granddad voice. Nicole, call me. She never did.
News quickly spreads to the rest of the family, who were also unable to reach Nicole.
I got the call, and I'm like, what is going on? Y'all seen Nicole? I'm like, no.
I'm like, this ain't normal. It's something wrong. Nicole is not going to abandon her kids. She's not going to leave them on the streets nowhere.
Everyone's asking, where is Nicole?
Detroit native Nicole Smith was used to overcoming hardships.
She developed problems when she was a baby. She had seizures. She limped on her right side, and she didn't really have full strength or use on her left side.
But Nicole displayed remarkable courage in the face of her numerous health challenges.
She was not an oh, woe is me person. No, she did take it in stride.
Nicole was very vibrant. She was bubbly.
Nicole is a very caring, loving, family-oriented young lady.
Her cousins was her friends. You know what I'm saying? She loved her music. She was funny.
Nicole also loved her longtime boyfriend, Damian Carver, and the couple wanted nothing more than to start a family together.
Well, Nicole was interested in being a mother.
And in the fall of 2007, her dream came true.
She got pregnant and had her first daughter, Kilana.
Tragically, though, heartbreak was on the horizon.
Kilana only lived for 5 months. She ended up dying of Cribb's death.
It was a devastating moment for the young couple, but in time, they decided to try again.
She ended up having a son 2 years after Kilana passed. Then the next year, she had a daughter, and then she had the youngest girl.
She was a good mother. She did anything and did the world for her kids.
However, when the couple's middle child began experiencing medical issues, it put further stress on their relationship.
They both were having problems with fully taking care of the 3 children. And it was just really a lot for both of them. They needed help.
Family members took in the couple's children while they worked on building a stable home.
Their relationship, it was being tumultuous and what have you.
Nicole and Damian eventually split. And around the same time, Nicole's mother passed away.
This was another hard time for Nicole.
She didn't have a job or a home of her own. She was suffering mentally and physically. That meant Nicole was especially vulnerable.
Although I and the rest of the family was a source of support for her, she was still having difficulties. She ended up getting pregnant and having Isaiah. And she didn't know who the father was.
However, Isaiah's birth in 2015 proved to be a turning point in Nicole's life.
Isaiah, his first words were mama.
Isaiah was a mama's boy. Anywhere that Nicole would go, he was on her tail.
They went and lived in the Genesis house, or transition house for homeless women. Genesis house was trying to help her get her own home, and she was in the process of it. She was actually supposed to move there maybe like within a month.
The more strides Nicole took towards building a happier life, the more she wanted someone to share it with.
Nicole was putting herself out there. She was starting to date again.
She loved her man. The ones she deal with, she gonna try to go all out to do what she gotta do to make him happy.
She was looking for love.
But now, a breaking news report has seized her family's attention.
Isaiah had been found on the street. Well, I got up right away and went to the police station.
When Conrad and his wife arrive at the station, they're relieved to be reunited with their great-grandson.
And Isaiah saw me and said, "Granddad, Granddad," and ran to me. And, I picked him up and held him. And so, where's your mommy? Where's your mommy? He didn't say anything.
Conrad tells the police no one has been able to reach his granddaughter Nicole since learning of her disappearance.
Something's not right.
And I said, well, this is more than a missing child. This is a missing person.
Let us know if you haven't heard from her by tomorrow morning, okay? Yes, sir. All right. Sweet.
All right, come on, sir.
As night settles over the city, Nicole's family is beginning to fear the worst.
I kept calling her the whole night.
Did she have a health emergency? Did someone attack her?
She ain't never did that one, just disappeared, never. I knew something was wrong.
The morning after her 18-month-old son was found wandering the streets of West Detroit, police officially declare 33-year-old Nicole Smith a missing person.
Her family had been trying to contact her nonstop for the last 24 hours.
The biggest question is, how does this 1-year-old child become separated from their mother?
When detectives speak with Nicole's grandfather, that's exactly what they want to find out.
When was the last time you saw Nicole?
Sunday afternoon, she and Isaiah came over to the house.
Nicole always visited us on Sundays, and I would pick her up at Genesis. She would come and spend a few hours with us, and then I'd take her back home.
However, Conrad says when he picked Nicole and Isaiah up that afternoon, something was troubling her.
Hey. Nicole said, Granddad, I'm gonna do something, and I don't know if I should do it or not. And so she had been being private around that time, so I said, well, Nicole, we brought you up right. You know how to make good decisions. And if you need some help, let us know, because we'll help you.
If you have any questions or need help with anything, just let us know, okay?
Thanks, Granddad.
So anyway, we got to the house, and Nicole did her normal thing. Hi, Granny, how you doing? Went through all of that.
Leaving Nicole and Isaiah with his wife, Conrad subsequently went out to run an errand. But when he returned, his granddaughter was gone.
When I got back to the house, Nicole wasn't there, and Isaiah wasn't there either.
Did Nicole and Isaiah leave?
No, they're not downstairs.
He went upstairs, you know, with Nicole at. My grandma was like, she downstairs. It was like, no, she ain't downstairs.
The plan was for me to drive her and Isaiah back to Genesis' house. She didn't say anything about getting picked up.
And that's something that is really one of our rules. You need to tell us when you're leaving the house. It's just for knowledge of where you're at in case something happened to you.
Do you have any idea who might have picked Nicole up?
I really don't. I'm always the one who drives her.
The family revealed Nicole suffered from seizures and she had some physical disabilities.
It's possible that something bad has happened medically. You know, maybe not even something criminal.
Still, Conrad can't get that last conversation he had with Nicole out of his mind.
I felt actually a sense of dread because she told me that she might be doing something that she didn't know if she should do or not. And so my mind went to, I wonder, did she do what she thought she shouldn't do?
Detroit investigators share the family's concerns and immediately get to work trying to track Nicole down.
Nicole had been missing since December the 11th, so that would be our starting point, and we would work backward from there.
They start calling hospitals. They check homeless shelters, and nobody had seen her.
We go back to the fire station because that is where Isaiah was turned over to the battalion chief there and the firefighter. So those two individuals were interviewed.
According to the firemen, a man walked into the station the previous afternoon with Isaiah in tow.
They're told that the man who dropped off Isaiah is a black man in his 30s.
He said he was on his way somewhere and observed this child wandering in the street alone.
I seen this kid just wandering the block, not a parent in sight. I thought maybe you guys could help.
He was instantly concerned, and so he picked up Isaiah, took him to the fire department.
He provided the name of Robert Johnson, and also at that time provided a telephone number.
That's the number he gave us.
We'll give it a shot.
Okay. They want to talk to this Good Samaritan just in case there's some additional information, something he may have seen to help them with their investigation.
But when detectives reach out to Robert, they run into a problem.
They call the number, a young female answers. They ask about Robert Johnson, and she says, I don't know Robert Johnson. I had never heard of this person. Why would a Good Samaritan leave them the wrong telephone number?
In the mind of a detective, that's a clue.
This Good Samaritan may not be such a Good Samaritan after all.
"24 hours after Nicole Smith disappeared, Detroit detectives have just made an unsettling discovery about the man who claimed to have found her son.
He presented himself as Robert Johnson, just a Good Samaritan, who happened to see this child wandering about with no adults in sight and took it upon himself, in a sense, to rescue the child.
But now investigators are wondering if this Robert Johnson is really who he says he is.
Come to find out, he's given a fake phone number.
We begin to conduct our queries to try to identify who this individual was.
Unfortunately, there were no cameras at the fire station. They instantly go back to the family asking, have you ever heard of Robert Johnson?
We was just all at home trying to just figure out who it could have been, who is this person, because we never met the person.
Fortunately, Nicole's cousin Ashley comes forward with information that she believes could help the investigation.
It was actually like my daughter who actually started coming up with suggestions, because they was real kind of close.
There was this guy that she was talking to on the phone a lot.
Do you know his name?
No, she never told me his name.
She was happy. She just on the phone, she lollygagging.
But Ashley's interactions with her mysterious male friend weren't all positive.
I watched my cousin call his phone from sun up to sundown one day, sitting in that dining room and kept redialing that number. I said, Nicole, what is you doing? Why did you keep dialing the number?
What are you doing? Why do you keep calling them?
Because he's not answering.
She said he was supposed to come over or come get me, something like this. I'm like, okay. But she kept calling that phone. I'm talking about she was furious, mad. That's the first time I ever saw her like that. Mad.
More recently, Ashley says Nicole had made a connection with an older man she met online.
I told them that she was talking about this old man that she had just met.
She didn't tell me his name either, but I know she was planning on meeting him in person.
The old man should message him only on Facebook. She'd sit in the dining room, set her phone on the charger, message him.
To investigators, it sounds like a potential lead.
Now, the police are concerned because we know that social media, Facebook, well, that's breeding ground for predators. So they're wondering, did she meet up with the wrong guy?
To detectives' surprise, Ashley says this wouldn't be the first time Nicole has fallen prey to a predatory man.
She done got raped at a bus stop before.
It was a little over a year ago.
On August 17th, 2015, Nicole was at a bus stop around 7:30 in the morning in front of her transitional housing.
She felt something hit her in the head. And when she woke up, she was in the alley and she had been raped.
She called me the morning that it happened and she was crying. I said, Nicole, go to the hospital. And so she went and she did go get the rape kit done.
Nicole is not able to really give a good description of the person who assaulted her, but what police are able to determine is that this person left semen.
That DNA sample was sent to the state crime lab for processing. But more than a year later, Nicole's attacker still hadn't been identified.
It's not uncommon for states to have a long backlog of untested rape kits. And at the time of Nicole's disappearance, her rape kit still had not been processed.
After speaking with Ashley, investigators contact the state crime lab to request a rush on Nicole's rape kit.
Whoever this individual was that raped Nicole could also be involved in her disappearance.
Detectives also file a subpoena for Nicole's cell phone records, and one number immediately stands out to them.
Once we received the data from the phone company, we were able to see that there were 77 telephone calls placed between Robert Autry and Nicole Smith.
Could Robert Autry and Robert Johnson be the same person?
Not only have they had contact via phone, but also on Facebook.
This began to form a picture in our minds. Based on my line of work, there can't be too many coincidences.
They're anxious to find this Robert Autry. Does he know where Nicole is?
Thanks to Nicole Smith's cell phone records, Detroit police have just identified a person of interest in the 33-year-old mother's disappearance.
She had been in near constant contact with this individual, this Robert Autry, in the days leading up to her disappearance.
Now the question is, who is Robert Autry? They wonder if maybe this Robert Autry is Robert Johnson, the Good Samaritan who dropped off her youngest child at the fire department.
Phone records show that Robert Autry last called Nicole on December 11th, one day before Isaiah was turned over to firefighters.
After December the 11th, he hadn't placed any more calls to Nicole. That's not normal.
Investigators uncover more troubling information when they start digging into Robert Autry's past.
While he was a high school student in 2003, he actually assaulted another student.
He's 16 years old, and he is accused of assaulting a mentally challenged girl.
He lured her into an abandoned building and raped her.
Ultimately, he's prosecuted, he does a plea deal, but because he's a juvenile, he doesn't receive any substantial sentence, but he is put on the sex offenders list.
Unfortunately, though, that wasn't enough to teach Robert a lesson.
It doesn't stop there. What the police also learned is that in 2011, Robert Autry assaults another woman. This young lady is recovering from drug addiction. She's at home one night. She says that someone breaks in, comes through the window, and he proceeds to assault and rape her.
Eventually, that DNA comes back as Robert Autry.
It began to look like this guy is a predator.
Records show that law enforcement tried to prosecute Robert again, this time as an adult. But the case fell apart when the victim refused to cooperate.
There are many reasons why someone may choose not to go forward. You know, it's traumatic.
So what that meant was that Robert walked away scot-free.
The striking similarities between the alleged rape in 2011 and Nicole's 2015 bus stop assault aren't lost on police.
This is clearly a guy who was targeting vulnerable women.
And when detectives send Robert Autry's 2011 mugshot to the firemen who helped Isaiah to safety, it's a match.
They were able to confirm, yes, this is the man who dropped off Isaiah. It's the same guy who claimed he was Robert Johnson.
Now that his true identity is confirmed, detectives hope they'll have an easier time tracking down their #1 suspect.
The police are looking for Robert. They're questioning people in the community.
They subpoenaed his phone records, and at the same time, they continued to reach out to Nicole's circle of family and friends.
When police speak to Nicole's best friend, Melanie, she says Nicole recently told her about a new man she was seeing, a man detectives now suspect is Robert Autry.
She was always either talking about him or talking to him on the phone. He had a hook, line, and sinker.
She just kept saying, my boyfriend, my boyfriend, my boyfriend. And I'm like, okay, I need to meet this boyfriend. And she said, you will meet him.
Only Melanie says that never happened. Instead, Nicole's new man seemed to intentionally keep his distance.
She had Robert come over to my house to pick her up one day. And it was kind of peculiar how he would not come to my door and he parked backwards where I couldn't see his face.
It was weird.
Melanie says in the days ahead, Nicole also started exhibiting strange behaviors with money.
She had asked me for about $200. And I said, why? She said, well, I gotta pay my rent at the shelter. I said, you already paid it. She said, well, I was behind. I said, okay. So I gave her the $200. And then a couple days later, she called me and said, well, I need probably like $50. And she gave me another excuse.
I think she was just doing what he told her to do.
That wasn't like Nicole, because Nicole always paid her rent and she always paid her bills.
Nicole received Social Security benefits, so she received money every month. She received a bridge card.
This was a government assistance card that Nicole used to buy food.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Detectives decide to follow the financial breadcrumbs by filing a subpoena for Nicole's financial records.
All of her financial, dealings had stopped when she disappeared, except authorities find that her bridge card is still in use.
Someone is taking Nicole's bridge card and using it at gas stations and other convenience stores within the area.
They know it was used at a supermarket and a liquor store. They're able to pull surveillance from those stores.
I started watching the video.
Wait. Stop there. Freeze that frame.
And there he is. It's Robert Autry.
In Detroit, Michigan, 30-year-old Robert Autry has emerged as the prime suspect in Nicole Smith's disappearance after being caught on camera using her stolen food stamps card.
We find Robert Autry taking Nicole's bridge card and using it at gas stations and other convenience stores within the area.
With a bolo out on Robert, detectives circulate his photo among Nicole's family members. And Nicole's cousin Ashley immediately recognizes him.
Like one day I went to the store with her. She wanted to walk by herself. I said, no, I'm gonna go with you. And that was the first time I ever saw the man. Hey, how you doing? I'm her cousin, you know.
Hey. Hey, what's up?
How are you?
I'm great. Hey, so did you get that message I sent you?
Yeah, I got it.
At the time, Ashley didn't realize this was the same man her cousin had been talking to on the phone for weeks.
She got him some money or whatever, then he gave her a hug, and then he walked back.
What did you just give him?
$200.
Are you serious?
It's not that serious. He said
That's
he
your
needed it.
money.
I don't want to talk about it. Just let it go.
I just felt like it wasn't right. I don't feel like he liked her. I felt like he was using her.
It became apparent that he was targeting her, so to speak.
And when investigators get their hands on Robert's phone records, they uncover another bombshell. Nicole wasn't the only woman in Robert's life.
His current girlfriend was living in that same transitional home that Nicole Smith was currently living at. He was essentially siphoning what Nicole was given to care for herself and her son, for his girlfriend, and for their children.
The investigators now have enough evidence to secure an arrest warrant for Robert, but they still have to find him.
Days go by without any leads on Robert's whereabouts. Until December 19th, when Nicole has been missing a full week.
They get a call from an anonymous person who tells them that Robert Autry is staying at an apartment building in the area.
As he's leaving, they take him into custody. And lo and behold, what does he have in his pocket? Nicole's bridge card.
Robert Autry was brought to Detroit Police Headquarters. There, myself and Officer James McDonald conducted an interrogation of Mr. Autry.
Robert, I'm not going to beat around the bush with you here. We're concerned about Nicole's well-being, and her phone records indicate that you two did talk.
So what?
Robert Autry denies having any kind of real relationship with Nicole other than a friendship.
So you two weren't in a romantic relationship?
Mr. Autry claims that he did not see Nicole on December the 11th.
But as investigators lay out the evidence, Robert starts to sweat.
He knew it didn't look good if he was the last one to see her.
We have two witnesses who can positively ID you as the man who dropped off Isaiah at the fire department.
When confronted with the truth, Mr. Autry had to change his story.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did see her that day.
He admits that she had called him for a ride.
He says to police that, look, he went to pick up Nicole from her grandfather's house to take her back to her transitional housing, that when he gets there, he drops her off.
It's a story the investigators are easily able to poke holes in.
So if you dropped off Nicole, why did you take her son to the fire department? And what's with the fake name?
Why does it matter?
To say the least, this interview conducted with Robert Autry was filled with lies, inconsistencies, information that he could not explain. When confronted, he would just provide an answer that frankly didn't make sense.
What were you doing with Nicole's bridge card?
I was borrowing it.
He said that she gave him the bridge card and that he had permission to use it, and he used it with her consent.
Robert, where's Nicole? Her family deserves to know the truth.
I didn't do nothing to her.
He's adamant that he had nothing to do with it. He dropped her off and he went about his business.
But detectives are convinced that isn't true.
Plainly put, Mr. Autry was lying.
They are convinced Robert Autry knows something about Nicole's disappearance. Unfortunately, though, they can't prove it.
This is such a difficult spot for investigators to be in. Everything's circumstantial.
When you don't have a body, when you don't have a person, it's very difficult to convict. It's very difficult to bring charges.
And so they need more evidence.
Without any proof connecting Robert to Nicole's disappearance, police are forced to release him. When the news reaches Nicole's family, they're stunned.
I understood if you don't have enough evidence, but that was a hard situation.
I was mad, you know.
Where's Nicole? That, for me, was the goal.
But the more time that passes, the harder it is to believe Nicole will ever be found.
I used to get off work and go searching for her on my own, going through railroad tracks, going under bridges, going to abandoned houses.
We were looking everywhere. We were just trying to figure out, where was she at?
Days go by. Days turns into weeks. Weeks turn into months.
Finally, in December of 2018, when Nicole has been missing a full 2 years, there's a new development that reignites the investigation.
Police get a big break in Nicole's case.
Mr. Autry had found himself arrested on an unrelated matter.
Robert Autry tells prosecutors, "Give me a plea deal and I will give you new information about Nicole."
He says, "I can tell you where her body is."
Two years after Nicole Smith went missing, Detroit investigators' #1 suspect in her disappearance has just been arrested on an unrelated case.
It's December 2018, and Robert Autry is arrested on another assaultive case.
He is once again accused of rape, and he's facing a life sentence.
He realizes this is a case he can't beat, and so he's very afraid about spending the rest of his life in prison.
In hopes of avoiding a life sentence, Robert reaches out to prosecutors.
Mr. Autry offers the information that, I can tell you where Nicole is.
Nicole's poor family has been waiting for answers for 2 years, and now Robert Autry, when faced with a life sentence, tells prosecutors, "Give me a plea deal, give me a lighter sentence, and I will give you new information about Nicole."
And so they do. They make a plea deal with him.
He is able to plead to a reduced second-degree murder.
Mr. Autry provided exact information as to where Nicole could be found.
The location is an abandoned apartment building in West Detroit.
Members of the Detroit Police Department responded to the area in which he had indicated.
They go inside and head to the basement. They find under a bunch of garbage a big black bag.
We made the unfortunate discovery, the remains of Nicole Smith.
Oh my God.
Obviously, at this point, the body is very badly decomposed.
It's a difficult scene to stomach, even for seasoned law enforcement officers.
To find her dead just sickened me. The state of disrepair and just the garbage everywhere, the dampness, the gloom of just this building. How dare you?
The medical examiners ruled Nicole's cause of death to be strangulation.
To add insult to injury, Nicole's body was just a few blocks away from her family all this time.
She's right like 8 blocks from my house. I done passed this building, and she's right here at the building I done passed every day. That's crazy.
8 blocks. I was crying. Like, my cousin gone.
I remember Granddaddy Greenlee calling me. He said they found Nicole's body. I remember screaming.
Apart from Nicole's location, Robert refuses to give up any more details of the crime. But even without a full confession, investigators are able to form a theory of how Nicole died.
Robert Autry obviously is someone who's addicted to power, control. He's looking for people that he can assault who are vulnerable. He's purposely targeting those with mental and physical disabilities.
Robert Autry was taking money from Nicole. He used her.
The authorities suspect that Nicole had begun to catch on to Robert's scheme.
You don't want to even answer her calls, and so after so long, a woman gonna get fed up, and she gonna cut you off.
Maybe the last conversation Nicole had with her grandfather was alluding to this potential confrontation. Maybe she was finally going to cut Robert out of her life.
Based on Robert's own statement, investigators believe he picked Nicole up from her grandfather's house on the afternoon of December 12th, 2016.
Hey, so, you got that money I asked for?
No, I'm not giving you any more money.
What you mean?
You already took all my money. Get a job.
Nicole, she's real feisty. So he might have said something to her in the car, and she gonna smack back.
She's decided to walk away, to stand up for herself, and to not deal with this abusive relationship.
She must have got right back at him with something he said. Maybe he just flipped out.
Go be a man.
Overcome with rage, detectives speculate that Robert wrapped his hands around Nicole's throat.
What? Get off me!
What happened yet?
He chokes her to death, and it all happens in front of Isaiah.
He's a monster. How could you take somebody's life in front of their child?
Once Nicole was dead, Robert realized he had to get rid of her body.
Now he has to cover his tracks. And so he takes Isaiah to the fire department. He takes her remains, he puts it into the basement of this apartment building.
To find her in this grave, in this tomb of a building, this is something that undoubtedly will remain with me for the rest of my life.
But before Robert is sentenced for his crimes, a new piece of evidence emerges that casts his actions in an even more despicable light.
A year before Nicole was murdered, she had been raped by an unknown assailant. That rape kit was eventually processed by the Michigan State Lab.
There was his semen in that rape kit.
I don't believe Nicole knew that Robert was the one who raped her.
He raped her before, and you still sought her out.
The fact that this man victimized her twice is so disgusting. He's pure evil.
On January 15th, 2019, Robert is sentenced to 15 to 30 years in prison as part of his plea deal.
He deserved what he got. He deserved more than what he got.
I just felt like, no, that's not enough. That's not enough time.
The way you tortured her, I feel like you should go through the same torture.
Robert is never charged in connection with Nicole's 2015 sexual assault.
That was very, very, very sickening to me. That they was only giving him charged with her murder, not the rape, because they couldn't detect it until after she was missing.
To honor Nicole, that same month, her friends and family hold a vigil at the abandoned building where her body was found.
We got the vigil together because we wanted her soul to rest. And a lot of people turned out, and it felt good. It felt so good.
I was happy and I was sad at the same time. I was happy that we was able to close that chapter. I was sad because that was my best friend.
We couldn't let that building stay there. My dad worked very hard on getting that building torn out.
We was praising the Lord. The very joyous time. We were all happy to see the building go.
Today, Nicole's son Isaiah is being raised by her cousin Shannon.
He's doing real good in school. He's bright. He's happy.
Her other 3 kids stayed with their father's family.
I wish she was here. I wish she was here to say I love you one more time, because I never got a chance to tell her I love her before she left.
Rain hammered the empty highway hard enough to blur the white lane markings into pale ghosts beneath the headlights. The storm rolled across Cedar Falls like something alive that night, violent wind rattling storefront windows, power lines humming in darkness, neon sign flickering weakly above deserted sidewalks. Inside the Cedar Lantern Diner, 17-year-old Melissa Grant wiped down the counter while country music crackled softly through an old radio near the kitchen. Nothing about the evening felt extraordinary. A few truckers finishing coffee, 2 teenagers sharing fries near the jukebox, a waitress laughing beside the register. Ordinary sounds, ordinary people. The kind of night nobody remembers until something terrible happens afterward. Then suddenly every detail matters forever. At exactly 9:37 p.m., Melissa looked toward the diner window and froze for half a second. The waitress standing beside her noticed it immediately. A dark sedan sat parked beneath the broken street lamp across the lot, engine running, headlights off, rain sliding slowly across the windshield. Melissa stared at the vehicle long enough for the waitress to ask if something was wrong. Melissa forced a smile. Probably nothing. Those were the last calm words anyone remembers her saying. 3 minutes later, she grabbed her denim jacket, told co-workers she would be right back, and stepped outside into the storm. She never returned. The disappearance shattered Cedar Falls before sunrise. Patrol cars flooded the streets, while volunteers carrying flashlights searched cornfields and drainage ditches through freezing rain. Officers knocked on doors house by house, asking the same desperate questions repeatedly. Did anyone hear screams? See suspicious vehicles? Notice strange movement near the diner? Most answers blurred together into confusion and uncertainty. The storm destroyed visibility. People stayed indoors. Nobody wanted to believe a teenage girl could vanish from a crowded parking lot without leaving behind even the smallest sign of struggle. But Melissa Grant was gone. Her car still sat untouched beside the diner. Her purse missing. Keys gone. No blood. No shattered glass. No evidence suggesting violence happened publicly. It was as though the darkness swallowed her whole. By morning, the story exploded across local television broadcasts. Melissa's school photograph appeared beside horrifying headlines repeated endlessly by reporters standing beneath rain-soaked police tape. Teen missing. Possible abduction. Community in shock. Cedar Falls transformed almost overnight from a quiet Midwestern town into the center of a growing nightmare. Parents locked doors for the first time in years. Gun shops sold out of ammunition within 48 hours. Teenage girls stopped walking home alone after sunset. Fear spread faster than facts because the absence of answers terrified people more than certainty ever could. Melissa's mother barely spoke during those first days. She sat beside the kitchen telephone smoking cigarettes continuously, while neighbors filled the house bringing casseroles nobody touched. Every passing car outside triggered panic. Every phone call created another explosion of hope, followed by disappointment. Her father reacted differently. He refused stillness entirely. He drove endlessly through surrounding counties, staring into wooded areas beside highways, convinced he might suddenly see his daughter, standing there alive, waiting for help. Neither of them slept. Not really. Not after that night. Investigators initially treated the disappearance as a runaway case despite protests from Melissa's family. That assumption enraged the community almost immediately because nothing about Melissa's life supported it. She maintained excellent grades, planned to attend college in Minnesota the following fall, worked part-time at the diner for extra money. Friends describe her as cautious, disciplined, almost painfully responsible. She did not drink heavily, did not use drugs, did not disappear impulsively. One classmate later described her as the kind of person who called home if she was 10 minutes late, which meant somebody interrupted her routine deliberately. That possibility changed everything. The first major clue surfaced 72 hours later when a highway maintenance worker discovered Melissa's purse abandoned beside an isolated rural access road nearly 40 miles outside town. Rainwater pooled around the leather straps, while police photographers documented the scene beneath gray morning skies. The purse itself disturbed investigators immediately because it looked placed rather than discarded. Cash remained inside untouched. Makeup items still organized neatly. Driver's license intact. Nothing stolen. It felt staged, as though someone wanted police to find it. Search teams descended onto surrounding woods within hours. 9 units tracked faint scent trails toward an overgrown creek bed before losing them entirely near rushing water swollen from the storm. Helicopters scanned nearby farmland while volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through mud searching for clothing, jewelry, anything connected to Melissa. Nothing appeared. Again, no body, no witnesses, no answers, only silence growing heavier by the day. Then came the sightings. Every missing person case eventually attracts them. Gas station clerks swearing they saw the victim buying cigarettes hundreds of miles away. Truck drivers claiming frightened girls whispered strange warnings inside diners before disappearing into crowds. Melissa's case became flooded with rumors, so quickly investigators struggled separating fantasy from reality. A waitress in Nebraska believed she served Melissa coffee beside Interstate 80. A motel owner in Missouri reported a crying teenage girl, matching her description, checking into a room with an older man. Another sighting surfaced in Arizona nearly 6 months later. All false, but each report reopened wounds inside the Grant family repeatedly. Hope became torture, and underneath the chaos, Detective Alan Mercer quietly developed a theory he refused discussing publicly. Melissa knew whoever approached her that night. Mercer joined the Cedar Falls Police Department only months before the disappearance. Young, obsessive, hungry to prove himself. The Grant case consumed him immediately because the crime scene felt wrong from the beginning. Most stranger abductions involve visible panic. Screams, resistance, witnesses noticing sudden violence. Melissa walked voluntarily toward the vehicle according to the limited testimony investigators possessed. That detail mattered enormously. She trusted the person enough to get close, maybe even enough to enter the car willingly. Mercer spent weeks reconstructing Melissa's final hours minute by minute. He interviewed classmates, co-workers, teachers, former boyfriends, neighbors, relatives. One pattern emerged repeatedly through those conversations. Melissa recently seemed distracted, nervous, not terrified exactly, but unsettled. A friend recalled her checking mirrors while driving home after work. Another remembered Melissa mentioning a weird older guy hanging around the diner too often. At the time, nobody pressed further. Now the memory felt poisonous. Then another detail surfaced. 2 employees independently described seeing a brown sedan parked near the diner multiple nights before the disappearance. Same location beneath the broken street lamp. Same headlights turned off. Same engine idling quietly in darkness during closing hours. Neither witness could identify the driver clearly because heavy rain and poor lighting obscured visibility. But one detail stayed consistent. The man appeared middle-aged, watching, waiting. The investigation widened aggressively afterward. Police examined registered owners of brown sedans across multiple counties. Hundreds of interviews followed. Mechanics, truck drivers, former offenders, traveling salesmen. Every possible lead collapsed eventually into nothing. Yet Melissa's name refused fading from public attention entirely. The story infected Cedar Falls psychologically. Children whispered theories at school. Churches held prayer vigils weekly. Local radio hosts debated suspects live on air late into the night. Some residents blamed drifters passing through town. Others feared someone local committed the crime. That possibility divided the community sharply because it meant the predator might still live among them, quietly pretending everything was normal. Years passed, then more years. The case cooled publicly, but never emotionally. Melissa's mother kept her bedroom untouched, clothes hanging neatly inside the closet, school books still stacked beside the bed. Every birthday, she baked the same chocolate cake Melissa loved and left one candle burning beside the window overnight. Her father deteriorated differently. He became obsessed with old highways. Neighbors described seeing him parked alone beside rural roads after midnight, staring into forests for hours without moving. He reportedly carried search maps in his truck until the day he died. Still no answers came. By the late 1990s, Melissa Grant officially became another cold case buried inside storage cabinets filled with aging reports and fading photographs. Younger officers barely recognized the file number anymore. Evidence deteriorated slowly with time. Witness memories weakened. Detectives retired. Only Alan Mercer refused letting go. Now older, exhausted, divorced partly because of his obsession with unsolved investigations, Mercer reopened the Grant file, repeatedly searching for details everyone else overlooked. One sentence inside an old interview transcript haunted him more than anything else. Melissa told a coworker 2 weeks before disappearing, "Sometimes I feel like somebody's watching me when I leave work." At the time, police dismissed it as anxiety. Mercer no longer believed that. Then came the phone call. January 14th, 2003. A blizzard buried Cedar Falls beneath ice, while Mercer worked alone inside the station, reviewing archived evidence. Shortly after midnight, the desk phone rang. Weak static crackled through the line. Then a calm male voice whispered 7 words that froze Mercer instantly. "You never looked close enough to home." Silence followed. The caller disconnected. No trace. No witnesses. Nothing. But Mercer later admitted something about the voice unsettled him deeply. Not panic. Not drunkenness. Calmness. Control. The tone sounded almost satisfied. And for the first time in 16 years, Detective Alan Mercer became convinced the person responsible for Melissa Grant's disappearance was not some passing stranger lost somewhere beyond Iowa highways. He believed the killer had been living quietly inside Cedar Falls all along. The storm returned the following night, as though the sky itself refused to let Cedar Falls breathe. Rainwater flooded gutters. Police cruisers cut slowly through dark streets, while porch lights glowed across silent neighborhoods, filled with terrified families watching the news through half-closed curtains. Melissa Grant had now been missing for 4 days, and the atmosphere inside town no longer felt normal. Fear changed the rhythm of everything. Grocery stores emptied earlier than usual. Teenagers stopped gathering after football games. Men carried flashlights, walking dogs at night. Women double-checked locks repeatedly before bed. The disappearance infected people because there was no explanation solid enough to contain the panic. A girl vanished from a crowded parking lot. No witnesses saw force. No screams echoed into the rain. And somewhere out there, investigators believed, somebody knew exactly what happened. Inside Cedar Falls Police Department, Detective Alan Mercer stared at crime scene photographs spread across a metal desk beneath fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. Melissa's abandoned purse. Tire impressions near the rural service road. Grainy images of the diner parking lot soaked in rainwater. Tiny fragments of a story refusing to fit together cleanly. The deeper Mercer looked, the more one detail disturbed him. Melissa left voluntarily, at least initially. There were no signs of panic near the diner entrance. No overturned objects. No reports of shouting. Witnesses described her standing calmly beside the dark sedan moments before disappearing. That suggested familiarity, trust, or manipulation so subtle she never realized danger until it was too late. Mercer began rebuilding Melissa's final month piece by piece. School records, work schedules, phone logs, friendships, romantic relationships, everything. And slowly, buried beneath ordinary teenage routines, strange details started surfacing. Melissa recently changed her route home from work. Twice, she stopped parking near the rear of the diner, even though it was closer to the employee entrance. One friend recalled Melissa refusing to walk alone after closing because someone creepy kept showing up near the restaurant. Nobody reported it officially. Nobody thought they needed to. That decision would haunt the investigation for decades. The first breakthrough appeared almost by accident. A 16-year-old dishwasher named Kevin Larkin finally admitted he recognized a brown sedan parked outside the diner. Detectives interviewed him twice before, but fear and confusion kept his statements vague. Now, exhausted and pressured by mounting public attention, he revealed something new. He had seen Melissa arguing with the driver days before she vanished. Not screaming, not violent, but tense. According to Kevin, the man inside the car looked older, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and a heavy build. He remembered Melissa stepping backward during the conversation before returning quickly inside the diner, visibly shaken. What did he want? Mercer asked. Kevin hesitated, then quietly answered, I think he wanted her to get in the car. The room fell silent. That single sentence transformed the investigation completely. Police immediately expanded focus toward adult men connected loosely to Melissa's daily life. Customers at the diner, neighbors, family acquaintances, former teachers, mechanics, delivery drivers, anyone fitting witness descriptions and owning vehicles remotely matching the brown sedan. One name surfaced repeatedly. Daniel Hargrove, 32 years old, married, father of two, local mechanic known throughout Cedar Falls for repairing cars cheaply. Melissa reportedly visited his garage twice during the summer before disappearing because her Honda Civic needed electrical work. Friends described Hargrove as quiet, but oddly intense around younger women. Nothing criminal, just unsettling. One waitress at the diner later admitted Hargrove stared at Melissa frequently during evening visits. Still, the evidence remained thin. Hargrove cooperated fully during questioning. Too fully, according to Mercer. He answered calmly, maintained eye contact, provided an alibi supported by his wife, who insisted Daniel spent the night of the disappearance at home watching television while storms rolled across town. Investigators searched his garage briefly, but uncovered nothing directly linking him to Melissa. Officially, the lead stalled. Unofficially, Mercer never stopped thinking about him, because something about Daniel Hargrove felt rehearsed, controlled, like a man carefully managing perception. Weeks passed without progress. Search efforts widened into neighboring counties, while national missing person organizations distributed Melissa's photograph across multiple states. Tips flooded the station daily. Most were useless. Psychic predictions, false sightings, anonymous accusations driven by paranoia rather than evidence. Cedar Falls slowly divided into two emotional camps. People convinced Melissa had been abducted by a passing stranger, and those terrified someone local committed the crime. The second theory poisoned the town more deeply. Because if the predator lived nearby, everyone suddenly became suspicious. Neighbors watched neighbors differently. Parents questioned teachers. Ordinary men driving alone at night attracted whispers. Fear transformed Cedar Falls into a place where trust deteriorated quietly beneath polite smiles. Then another clue surfaced. 10 days after the disappearance, a farmer discovered fresh tire tracks near an abandoned hunting cabin roughly 15 miles from where Melissa's purse had been found. Investigators rushed to the scene, expecting another dead end. Instead, they uncovered something chilling. Inside the cabin sat a folding chair facing the doorway. Beside it, investigators found cigarette butts, empty beer cans, and a blanket smelling faintly of mildew and motor oil. More disturbing still, forensic teams recovered several strands of long blonde hair caught against splintered wood near a rear window. Melissa was blonde. The discovery exploded through local media instantly. Secret cabin horror. Missing girl held captive? Police hunt rural predator. But hope collapsed days later when forensic analysis failed to conclusively identify the hair samples. DNA technology in 1987 remained painfully limited. Investigators could determine general characteristics, but not definitive ownership. Worse still, fingerprints recovered inside the cabin belonged mostly to hunters and local teenagers who used the abandoned structure occasionally for drinking parties. Another dead end. Another emotional collapse for the Grant family. Melissa's mother reportedly fainted after hearing rumors the cabin contained evidence of torture. Her father stopped speaking almost entirely, except during police meetings. Friends described him aging visibly week by week, as though exhaustion hollowed him from the inside. And through all of it, Detective Mercer kept circling back toward Daniel Hargrove. Mercer learned Hargrove hunted frequently near the same rural areas connected to the investigation. He owned a brown 1979 Oldsmobile sedan matching general witness descriptions. More troubling, one former co-worker quietly admitted Hargrove occasionally made disturbing comments about young women years earlier. Still no evidence connected him directly to Melissa. Nothing prosecutors could use. Then the case took another dark turn. 3 months after Melissa vanished, another young woman reported a terrifying encounter outside a grocery store 30 miles away. 19-year-old Rebecca Sloan told police a middle-aged man driving a brown sedan followed her through the parking lot repeatedly before attempting to convince her into his vehicle by claiming her mother had been injured in an accident. Rebecca refused. The driver became angry instantly. According to her statement, his voice changed completely. Cold, aggressive, almost panicked. Then he sped away before police arrived. Rebecca later identified Daniel Hargrove from a photo lineup with 70% certainty. Not enough for arrest. Not enough for warrants. But enough to deepen Mercer's obsession. He began following Hargrove quietly after shifts ended, watching his routines, documenting movements, studying behavior for cracks in a carefully maintained suburban image. What Mercer discovered unsettled him further. Hargrove drove aimlessly at night for hours, especially during storms, sometimes parking near isolated roads without explanation, sometimes sitting outside closed businesses long after midnight, always alone, always watching. Mercer believed he was observing a predator, reliving something privately, but belief meant nothing without proof. Years slipped away. The Melissa Grant investigation slowly decayed beneath dust and bureaucratic exhaustion, while Cedar Falls attempted moving forward. New stores opened downtown. Families relocated. Teenagers who once joined search parties became adults with children of their own. Yet the disappearance never fully released its grip on the town. Every anniversary reopened wounds. Every unidentified body discovered anywhere in the Midwest triggered renewed panic until dental records or fingerprints ruled Melissa out. And somewhere beneath the surface of ordinary suburban life, Detective Alan Mercer remained convinced the truth was still hiding close to home, waiting, silent, protected by time. Then, 15 years after Melissa disappeared into the rain outside the Cedar Lantern Diner, a phone call received during a midnight snowstorm would force Mercer to reopen the darkest possibility of all, that the man responsible had spent every single day since 1987 living quietly among the very people searching for him. Snow buried Cedar Falls beneath a layer of white, so thick the entire town looked frozen in time. Streetlights glowed weakly through falling ice while rooftops disappeared beneath drifts piling higher by the hour. Inside the police station, Detective Alan Mercer sat motionless at his desk, replaying the anonymous phone call again and again inside his head. You never looked close enough to home. 7 words. That was all. But Mercer could not escape the feeling that the caller knew something real. Not rumor, not speculation. Knowledge. The voice sounded older, controlled, almost amused by the investigation's failures. Worse still, the sentence aligned perfectly with Mercer's own growing suspicion that Melissa Grant's disappearance originated from someone inside Cedar Falls rather than a passing highway predator. The possibility chilled him because it meant the killer may have spent 15 years blending into ordinary life unnoticed while the town slowly tore itself apart searching for answers. Mercer reopened every interview connected to Daniel Hargrove. Every statement, every timeline inconsistency, every forgotten detail buried beneath decades of paperwork. The deeper he looked, the more disturbing patterns emerged. Hargrove's wife originally told investigators he remained home all night during the storm in 1987, but in a later interview conducted months afterward, she phrased the timeline differently. She said Daniel came home before 10, not all night. The discrepancy was small enough most detectives ignored it entirely. Mercer did not. Another witness remembered hearing Hargrove's garage door opening unusually late that same evening. A gas station clerk recalled seeing a brown Oldsmobile speeding along Route 14 shortly after 10 p.m. during heavy rain. None of the fragments proved anything individually. Together they formed the outline of something darker. Then Mercer uncovered the report that changed everything. Buried inside old county records sat an overlooked complaint filed 6 months before Melissa disappeared. A 17-year-old girl named Laura Bennett reported being followed repeatedly by an older man driving a brown sedan after leaving evening shifts at a grocery store outside Cedar Falls. According to the report, the driver once approached her directly in a parking lot and offered to help fix her car problems. Laura refused. The man became irritated immediately. When shown old DMV photographs years later, Laura identified Daniel Hargrove as the driver with near certainty. The original investigation into her complaint went nowhere because no crime technically occurred. Now the connection felt explosive. Mercer believed he was no longer looking at isolated coincidences. He believed he was watching the behavioral pattern of a predator escalating over time. Still, evidence remained painfully circumstantial, and Daniel Hargrove continued living peacefully inside Cedar Falls like nothing had ever happened. That normality infuriated Mercer more than anything else. Every morning, Hargrove opened his repair shop at 7. Customers described him as polite, hard-working, dependable. He coached Little League during summers, attended church irregularly, hosted backyard barbecues, smiled in family photographs. The image looked painfully ordinary compared to the darkness Mercer suspected existed underneath. But predators often survive through normality. That was a terrifying truth Mercer learned studying violent offenders over the years. The most dangerous individuals rarely appear monstrous publicly. They blend, adapt, mimic routine human behavior so effectively that suspicion feels unreasonable until evidence finally shatters the illusion. And Mercer desperately needed that evidence. By 2004, advances in forensic science reopened possibilities unavailable during the original investigation. Old biological samples, once considered useless, could now produce partial DNA profiles under the right conditions. Mercer pushed aggressively to re-examine everything recovered in 1987. Melissa's purse, hair strands from the hunting cabin, cigarette butts, fibers, even degraded skin cells lifted from the purse strap decades earlier. Most results returned inconclusive. Then the laboratory discovered something buried deep within the evidence inventory. A partial male DNA sample recovered from underneath Melissa's fingernails. Tiny, fragmented, but usable enough for comparison. Mercer immediately requested Daniel Hargrove's DNA. The request triggered chaos inside the department. Supervisors resisted aggressively because Mercer still lacked probable cause strong enough to justify warrants. Hargrove had no criminal history, no direct forensic ties to Melissa, no eyewitness placing him with her definitively that night. Pursuing forced DNA collection risked lawsuits and public backlash if Mercer's suspicions proved wrong. So Mercer changed tactics. He waited, watched, studied Hargrove carefully for opportunities. Then chance intervened unexpectedly. On September 3rd, 2005, Daniel Hargrove threw away a half-empty coffee cup outside a local hardware store. Mercer retrieved it personally. The DNA comparison took 3 agonizing weeks. When results finally arrived, the station reportedly fell silent. No match, not even close. Mercer stared at the report for nearly an hour, unable to process the disappointment. 15 years of obsession suddenly collapsed beneath cold forensic certainty. Supervisors pressured him immediately to stop pursuing Hargrove entirely. Some officers privately questioned whether Mercer's fixation with the case had become unhealthy. Maybe it had, but one detail kept bothering him: the anonymous caller. If Hargrove was innocent, why did the voice feel connected somehow to Mercer's growing suspicions? Why did the warning specifically push investigators closer toward local suspects? Mercer refused to let go completely, and that refusal would eventually save the case. Because 6 months later, another woman disappeared. Her name was Angela Price, 22 years old, college student, last seen leaving a movie theater 40 miles outside Cedar Falls after midnight. The similarities terrified investigators instantly. Nighttime disappearance, heavy rain, no witnesses observing direct violence, vehicle abandoned untouched. For the first time in years, fear exploded across the region again. Media outlets immediately revived comparisons to Melissa Grant. Reporters replayed old footage from 1987 beside new interviews with terrified residents. Parents panicked openly. Some stores sold out of pepper spray within days. But Angela's case contained one critical difference. She came back alive. 3 days after disappearing, Angela staggered barefoot onto a rural highway nearly 60 miles from where she vanished. Hypothermic, injured, barely coherent. State police rushed her to a hospital while investigators surrounded the building desperate for information. What Angela described horrified them. According to her statement, a man pretending to need roadside assistance approached her after the movie ended. She agreed briefly to help before he attacked her from behind. The suspect blindfolded her, drove for what felt like hours, then held her inside a dark, isolated structure while threatening repeatedly to kill her if she looked at his face. But Angela remembered fragments. The smell of motor oil, country music playing softly nearby, a deep male voice with slight rasp, and one detail that froze Mercer completely. The man drove a brown sedan. Angela later helped create a composite sketch. The resemblance to Daniel Hargrove was not perfect, but it was close enough to terrify Mercer. Police moved aggressively this time. Search warrants executed at Hargrove's garage uncovered ropes, old blankets, hunting knives, and pornography involving violent abduction fantasies. Disturbing, yes. Criminal, not necessarily. Investigators also discovered that Hargrove owned property near the same wooded region connected to Melissa's abandoned purse years earlier. Still, Angela could not positively identify him. And once again, hard evidence refused to materialize. Then came the final blow. Hargrove hired an attorney. Questioning stopped immediately. Public pressure intensified against Mercer after local newspapers accused police of harassing a respected family man based entirely on circumstantial theories. Some residents defended Hargrove passionately, insisting detectives target him unfairly because they failed solving Melissa's disappearance years earlier. Mercer's career began collapsing quietly beneath the strain. His supervisors reassigned him temporarily away from active homicide investigations. Internal reviews examined whether he violated surveillance policies during the Hargrove investigation. Friends worried the obsession was destroying him emotionally. Maybe they were right. But Mercer could not shake the feeling that the truth sat directly in front of him, hidden behind layers of bad luck, missing evidence, and time. Then, late one October night in 2006, while reviewing archive photographs from the original Melissa Grant investigation one final time before mandatory reassignment, Mercer noticed something so small most detectives would have overlooked it forever. A reflection, barely visible inside rainwater pooled across the diner parking lot. The blurred outline of a license plate attached to a dark sedan beneath the broken street lamp. And the final 3 digits looked horrifyingly familiar. The photograph looked useless at first glance. Rain distorted the pavement into a shimmering black mirror beneath the diner lights. Police tape fluttering faintly in the storm, while investigators moved through blurred shadows across the parking lot. Most detectives would have filed it away without another thought. But Alan Mercer had spent nearly 2 decades staring at this case, so obsessively that tiny inconsistencies jumped out at him instinctively. 3 numbers. That was all he could see clearly in the reflection. 7.3.9. Incomplete, warped by water, barely visible beneath streaks of rain and light distortion. But Mercer's stomach tightened instantly because Daniel Hargrove's old brown Oldsmobile carried license digits ending in 739. For several seconds, Mercer simply stared at the image without blinking. Then adrenaline exploded through him. He rushed downstairs into the evidence archives, searching for vehicle registration records connected to Hargrove during the late 1980s. Dust-covered folders spilled across tables, while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead deep into the night. Mercer's hands physically shook turning pages. Finally he found it. 1979 Oldsmobile Delta 88. Registered owner, Daniel Thomas Hargrove. Plate ending, 739. Mercer felt cold all over. It was not definitive proof. Defense attorneys could destroy the photograph easily in court because the reflection remained blurry and incomplete. But emotionally, psychologically, the image changed everything. For the first time in 19 years, Mercer believed he possessed something tangible placing Hargrove near the diner during Melissa's disappearance. And he intended to push harder than ever before. The next morning, Cedar Falls woke beneath gray skies and freezing wind, while Mercer assembled a task force meeting that quickly spiraled into confrontation. Senior officers remained deeply skeptical. They had watched Mercer chase Hargrove for years without achieving arrests, warrants, or forensic breakthroughs. To many inside the department, the obsession bordered on dangerous fixation. Mercer didn't care anymore. He laid the photograph on the table beside vehicle records and witness statements, connecting brown sedans to the diner repeatedly before Melissa vanished. "This man was there," Mercer said quietly. "We've been looking at him since 1987 and let him walk away every single time." The room stayed silent. Then Captain Rollins leaned back slowly and asked a question nobody wanted to answer. If Hargrove took Melissa, where's the body? Mercer had no response, because that was still the central nightmare consuming the case. No remains, no murder scene, no confession. Without a body, prosecutors face enormous challenges even if stronger circumstantial evidence emerged. Melissa Grant remained legally missing, not officially deceased. Defense attorneys would tear apart any prosecution built primarily on suspicion and fragmented timelines. Still, Mercer refused to stop. And something else bothered him now. The anonymous phone call years earlier. You never looked close enough to home. What if the call was not mocking police? What if someone close to Hargrove had tried subtly pointing investigators toward him without exposing themselves directly? That possibility reopened every relationship surrounding Daniel Hargrove. Family, friends, co-workers, former girlfriends. Mercer began re-interviewing people quietly once again. Most conversations led nowhere. Then he spoke to Hargrove's younger brother. Thomas Hargrove lived 2 counties away and rarely returned to Cedar Falls anymore. Thin, nervous, chain-smoking constantly during interviews, Thomas initially resisted discussing his brother entirely. But after several hours, he admitted something deeply unsettling. Daniel changed after 1987. Before Melissa vanished, he could be angry, controlling, unpredictable. But afterward, according to Thomas, something inside him became colder, detached, hypervigilant. He installed multiple locks throughout his house despite living in a safe neighborhood, began drinking heavily at night, developed strange habits like driving alone during storms for no apparent reason. Then Thomas revealed another detail. In the weeks following Melissa's disappearance, Daniel suddenly repainted the interior trunk of his Oldsmobile. Mercer froze. "Why?" Thomas shrugged nervously. He said it smelled bad. The statement hit Mercer like a physical blow. Police immediately searched archived evidence records, hoping investigators, in 1987, collected forensic samples from Hargrove's vehicle. But because he was never considered a primary suspect officially, no deep forensic examination occurred. The Oldsmobile itself disappeared years earlier after Hargrove reportedly sold it to a scrapyard outside Des Moines. Another devastating missed opportunity. Another piece of history lost forever. Yet Mercer sensed pressure building around Hargrove, now in ways that had not existed before. Repeated questioning, renewed surveillance, public rumors returning across Cedar Falls after Angela Price's abduction. Even if police lacked enough evidence for arrest, Mercer believed Hargrove understood the investigation was circling closer than ever, and predators under pressure make mistakes. That theory proved true on March 11, 2007. At 2:14 a.m., officers responded to reports of a vehicle parked suspiciously near abandoned farmland outside Cedar Falls. A deputy arriving first discovered Daniel Hargrove standing beside his pickup truck near a shallow excavation site, partially hidden beneath dead brush and snowmelt. Hargrove claimed he was hunting coyotes. At 2 a.m, during freezing rain, the deputy found no weapons discharged and no immediate evidence of criminal activity, so Hargrove was released after brief questioning. But what disturbed investigators later was the location itself. The site sat less than 8 miles from where Melissa's purse had been discovered 20 years earlier. Mercer became convinced Hargrove returned there for a reason: memory, guilt, or fear that something remained buried nearby. Search teams excavated portions of the property days later using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. News helicopters circled overhead, While reporters gathered beside muddy police tape anticipating the breakthrough, Cedar Falls waited decades to witness. Nothing surfaced. No remains. No clothing. No forensic evidence. Just wet earth and disappointment. The emotional collapse devastated Melissa's surviving family members once again. Her mother reportedly stopped answering calls entirely afterward. Friends described her sitting silently for hours, staring through windows, as if grief itself had exhausted language completely. Meanwhile, public opinion inside Cedar Falls began turning viciously divided. Some residents now openly believe Daniel Hargrove murdered Melissa and escaped justice through luck and technicalities. Others accuse police of conducting a witch hunt against a man never formally charged with any violent offense. Hargrove himself remained eerily calm through everything. That calmness terrified Mercer most. During one interview, Mercer directly asked whether he knew Melissa Grant personally outside routine car repairs. Hargrove smiled faintly. "Small town," he answered. "Everybody knows everybody." Then he leaned forward slightly. "You ever think maybe you need this case more than you need the truth?" The words stayed with Mercer for months afterward, because deep down, part of him feared Hargrove might be right. The investigation consumed his marriage, his health, his career progression. Younger detectives whispered that Mercer looked haunted permanently now. Sleep deprivation hollowed his face. He kept files stacked across his apartment like shrines to unfinished nightmares. Melissa Grant became less a case than an obsession stretching across half his adult life. Still, he could not stop, because every instinct screamed the answer remained close, hidden beneath ordinary suburban routines. Then, in August 2008, a woman named Claire Donnelly walked into Cedar Falls Police Department carrying a cardboard box that would shock investigators completely. Claire recently divorced Daniel Hargrove's cousin after 23 years of marriage. During the separation, she cleaned storage areas inside an old family property scheduled for sale. Hidden beneath dusty camping equipment in the garage attic, she discovered the box wrapped carefully in plastic tarps. Inside sat dozens of newspaper clippings about Melissa Grant. Photographs, maps, timeline notes, search area articles, obsessive documentation stretching back 20 years. But one item inside the box stopped Mercer cold. A faded Polaroid photograph showing Melissa standing outside the Cedar Lantern Diner weeks before she vanished. The image had clearly been taken secretly from a distance. And scrawled across the bottom corner in black marker were 3 words that made Mercer's blood run cold. She should have listened. The photograph spread through Cedar Falls like poison. She should have listened. 3 words written in thick black marker beneath a secretly taken image of Melissa Grant standing outside the Cedar Lantern Diner, completely unaware someone watched her through a camera lens from across the street. The moment Detective Alan Mercer saw it, he understood the investigation had crossed into something far darker than obsession or coincidence. This was not casual interest, not curiosity from a true crime collector. The box hidden inside the garage attic looked like the private archive of someone fixated on Melissa for years, maybe decades. The Polaroid itself disturbed investigators most because of how ordinary the moment appeared. Melissa wore jeans and a loose gray sweater while laughing beside another waitress near the diner entrance. Evening sunlight reflected across parked cars behind her. Nothing threatening visible anywhere in the frame, except the angle. The photographer clearly hid behind another vehicle or structure while taking it, watching, waiting, studying her without consent. Mercer immediately traced ownership of the storage property where Claire Donnelly discovered the box. The garage belonged originally to Daniel Hargrove's deceased uncle, but several relatives accessed the building over years, including Daniel himself. That connection alone was enough for Mercer to secure new warrants targeting Hargrove aggressively for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Officers arrived at Hargrove's house before sunrise. Neighbors watched through curtains while detectives carried evidence boxes through freezing morning rain. Television vans appeared within hours after police scanners leaked details about the search. Cedar Falls exploded with rumors again. Coffee shops buzzed with whispered conversations. Radio hosts debated whether the town's greatest mystery might finally break open after 21 years. Inside Hargrove's home, investigators uncovered disturbing material almost immediately. Hidden beneath floorboards in the basement sat several locked metal containers filled with newspaper clippings involving missing women from across the Midwest dating back to the 1980s. Detectives also recovered maps marked with isolated rural locations, stacks of women's photographs cut from magazines, and handwritten journals containing fragmented thoughts investigators later described as deeply unsettling. One entry read, "They always think they're safe until a moment changes." Another stated, "Some disappear because nobody listens." But the most horrifying discovery waited inside a rusted toolbox hidden behind shelves near the furnace. A single white sneaker, women's size 7. Melissa Grant wore size 7 shoes the night she vanished. Mercer reportedly stood frozen for several seconds staring at the evidence bag, while crime scene photographers documented the find beneath harsh basement lighting. The sneaker appeared old, yellowed slightly with age, but remarkably preserved. Dirt remained embedded inside the sole pattern. For the first time since 1987, investigators believed they might finally possess direct physical evidence connected to Melissa. The entire town held its breath awaiting forensic results. Then came another devastating blow. The shoe could not be conclusively identified as Melissa's. The brand matched, the size matched, but the specific model sold widely throughout the late 1980s, and Melissa's parents possessed no purchase records or unique identifiers linking it definitively to her. DNA degradation after 2 decades complicated analysis further. Technicians recovered partial biological traces, but contamination over time prevented absolute conclusions. Close. Again. Always close. Never enough. Mercer felt rage building inside him stronger than ever before. Every step toward Hargrove uncovered something sinister, yet still stopped inches short of undeniable proof. It was like chasing a ghost capable of slipping through cracks in reality itself. And Daniel Hargrove continued denying everything calmly. During questioning, he explained the newspaper clippings as general interest, claimed the sneaker probably belonged to his daughter years earlier, insisted the journals represented fictional writing exercises inspired by crime novels. Then he looked directly at Mercer and smiled faintly. "You keep trying to build a monster because you can't stand not solving the story." Mercer nearly lost control in the interview room that day. Other detectives later admitted they feared the case was becoming psychologically dangerous for him. 21 years chasing the same shadow had blurred lines between professional determination and personal fixation, but Mercer no longer cared how others viewed him. Because buried underneath Hargrove's rehearsed calmness, Mercer sensed fear finally surfacing. Tiny cracks, subtle changes, and predators under pressure eventually make mistakes. That mistake came unexpectedly from someone investigators overlooked for years. Daniel Hargrove's wife. Susan Hargrove had defended her husband since the beginning. Quiet, religious, intensely private, she avoided media attention and rarely spoke publicly about the investigation. But weeks after the basement search, she contacted Mercer, secretly requesting a meeting away from town. They met inside a nearly empty diner 40 miles outside Cedar Falls during heavy snowfall. Susan looked exhausted, older than her years, hands trembling around untouched coffee. For several minutes, she said nothing, then quietly whispered, "I think my husband is capable of terrible things." Mercer felt adrenaline surge instantly. Susan described years of behavior she buried emotionally out of fear and denial. Daniel experienced explosive mood swings, controlled finances obsessively, disappeared late at night without explanation, kept hidden storage lockers she was forbidden from accessing, sometimes woke screaming from nightmares involving women crying. But one memory haunted her most. Several days after Melissa vanished in 1987, Susan discovered Daniel washing the trunk interior of his Oldsmobile repeatedly during freezing rain behind their garage. When she asked why, he snapped violently, "Because it's filthy." The response frightened her enough that she never questioned him again. Then Susan revealed something even worse. A few months earlier, while cleaning old paperwork in the basement, she found a folded road map marked with circles around isolated wooded areas near Cedar Falls. One location matched the same rural region where Melissa's purse was discovered decades earlier. When Susan confronted Daniel indirectly about the map, his reaction terrified her. "He looked at me," she told Mercer quietly, "like he was deciding whether I knew too much." Mercer pushed immediately for deeper searches targeting every property and storage unit connected to Hargrove. This time, prosecutors supported him aggressively because public pressure intensified after Susan's cooperation leaked anonymously to local media. The entire state seemed consumed by the possibility that Cedar Falls harbored a killer hidden in plain sight for decades. Search teams excavated remote hunting areas linked to Hargrove throughout spring 2009. Cadaver dogs reacted strongly at multiple sites. Ground-penetrating radar identified unusual soil disturbances. News helicopters hovered overhead constantly, while volunteers gathered beside police lines praying for answers. Then, on April 17th, investigators uncovered human remains buried nearly 6 feet underground beneath dense woodland approximately 12 miles outside Cedar Falls. The discovery stopped the entire investigation cold. Forensic teams sealed the area immediately while Mercer stood motionless beside the excavation site, watching technicians brush mud carefully from skeletal fragments hidden beneath rotted tarp material. Nearby, they recovered rusted jewelry, a belt buckle, fragments of blue fabric. The remains belonged to a female estimated between 16 and 20 years old. Melissa Grant disappeared at 17. By nightfall, national news networks flooded Cedar Falls. Cold case horror. Human remains found. Missing teen mystery nearing breakthrough. Melissa's mother reportedly collapsed after hearing the announcement. Her father sat silently outside the family home smoking cigarettes beside reporters gathered across the street beneath bright television lights. And through all of it, Daniel Hargrove remained terrifyingly calm. No panic. No emotional outbursts. Nothing. When detectives informed him remains had been discovered near property connected loosely to his hunting activities, he simply asked one question. "Did you identify her yet?" Mercer later admitted that sentence chilled him more deeply than any other moment in the entire investigation, because it sounded less like shock and more like concern over whether police finally proved what he spent 22 years hiding. Then the forensic report arrived. The remains were not Melissa Grant. The victim was another missing girl entirely. The body belonged to 16-year-old Rachel Whitmore, a runaway who vanished in 1991 nearly 80 miles from Cedar Falls. For 18 years, her family believed she drifted somewhere across the country chasing a different life. Instead, she spent almost 2 decades buried beneath frozen Iowa soil wrapped in deteriorating tarp, while seasons passed quietly overhead. The revelation detonated through Cedar Falls like another bomb, because suddenly the investigation no longer centered only around Melissa Grant. Now, police faced the possibility of a serial predator operating across multiple counties for years without detection. Television networks descended on the town immediately. Satellite trucks lined downtown streets. Reporters camped outside the police department waiting for updates, while national headlines transformed Daniel Hargrove from local mechanic into the center of a horrifying new theory. Cold case killer? Buried secrets in Iowa woods. Did police miss a serial predator for decades? Inside the station, investigators reopened unsolved disappearances, stretching back to the late 1980s, searching desperately for patterns connected to Hargrove. Missing teenagers, hitchhikers, women last seen near highways or rural towns. The list grew disturbingly long. And at the center of everything stood Alan Mercer, exhausted, aging, and more obsessed than ever. Because Rachel Whitmore's remains changed one crucial detail completely. Hargrove now sat connected physically to a murder victim. Maybe not enough for conviction yet, but enough to destroy the illusion that Mercer spent 20 years chasing fantasies. Still, Melissa remained missing. That truth haunted every room inside the investigation. Rachel's discovery proved something terrible happened in those woods. But prosecutors still lacked direct forensic evidence placing Melissa there or linking Hargrove conclusively to her disappearance. Worse, defense attorneys attacked aggressively once media pressure exploded. Hargrove's legal team accused police of manipulating circumstantial evidence and contaminating public opinion through leaks. Then another shock arrived. Forensic analysis recovered male DNA from material buried alongside Rachel Whitmore's remains. Not Hargrove's. The result stunned investigators completely. Mercer refused to believe it initially. He reread the report repeatedly, searching for errors. But the science remained clear. Biological traces connected to Rachel belonged to an unidentified male profile absent from criminal databases. Suddenly, the case fractured into terrifying new possibilities. Had investigators targeted the wrong man for decades? Was Rachel killed by someone else entirely? Or worse, was Hargrove connected to additional offenders operating together? The uncertainty poisoned morale inside the department instantly. Supervisors quietly considered scaling back portions of the investigation, again fearing Mercer's obsession blinded him toward alternative explanations. Younger detectives questioned whether the discovery near Hargrove's hunting area represented coincidence rather than guilt. After all, the woods stretched across miles of isolated terrain, accessible to countless people over decades. But Mercer refused surrender, because despite the DNA contradiction, instinct kept dragging him toward Hargrove relentlessly. And then Susan Hargrove disappeared. The timing terrified everyone. She vanished 3 days after meeting secretly with Mercer. Her car was discovered abandoned beside Highway 20 shortly after midnight, engine still running, driver's door partially open. Purse remained inside untouched. No blood, no signs of struggle visible initially. Just another empty vehicle sitting beneath cold rain, while police lights flashed across wet asphalt. Mercer felt physically sick when the call came through. He reached the scene within minutes, convinced instantly that Susan's disappearance connected directly to the investigation. Officers searched nearby ditches and woodland areas through darkness, while helicopters scanned fields from above. News crews arrived before dawn, broadcasting terrifying comparisons between Susan and Melissa Grant. Another woman gone. Another empty vehicle. Another stormy Iowa night. This time, however, police moved faster. Phone records revealed Susan attempted calling Mercer less than 30 minutes before disappearing. The voicemail captured only static and one fragmented sentence barely audible beneath road noise. He knows. Then silence. Investigators descended onto Daniel Hargrove immediately, but once again, he appeared maddeningly calm. According to his attorney, Daniel spent the evening home alone watching television before discovering Susan missing himself. Mercer did not believe a word. Search warrants executed at the Hargrove residence uncovered signs of recent cleaning inside the garage. Bleach residue coated portions of the concrete floor strongly enough that forensic technicians noted it immediately. Detectives also discovered fresh scratches along the interior of Hargrove's pickup truck bed. Still no body surfaced. No direct evidence. No arrest. The pattern repeated like a curse, haunting the investigation endlessly. Days passed without answers until a farmer discovered Susan Hargrove wandering barefoot near railroad tracks 20 miles outside Cedar Falls. Dehydrated, disoriented, terrified, she carried bruises across her wrists and a deep cut near her forehead. But what shocked investigators most was her silence. Susan refused repeatedly to identify who abducted her. Even privately, Mercer interviewed her twice inside the hospital. Each time she appeared emotionally shattered, staring toward windows constantly as though expecting someone to appear outside. Finally, Mercer asked directly, "Did Daniel do this to you?" Susan's eyes filled with tears instantly, but instead of answering, she whispered something far more disturbing. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Then she refused further cooperation entirely. The statement haunted Mercer afterward because it sounded less like denial and more like fear. Real fear. The kind surviving victims carry long after violence ends. And slowly, investigators began uncovering evidence suggesting Susan endured years of psychological abuse hidden carefully behind suburban normality. Friends described her becoming increasingly isolated over time. Family members recalled sudden, unexplained bruises she dismissed clumsily. One neighbor reported hearing violent screaming from a Hargrove house late at night on multiple occasions during the 1990s. Still, Susan would not testify against her husband. Without cooperation, prosecutors remained trapped again between suspicion and proof. Then forensic analysts examining old evidence from Melissa Grant's case made an unexpected discovery buried beneath modern DNA enhancement techniques. Skin cells recovered decades earlier from Melissa's purse produced a partial female DNA profile. Not Melissa's. Someone else touched the purse shortly before police recovered beside the rural road in 1987. The profile matched Susan Hargrove. Mercer stared at the report in disbelief. Suddenly, the entire investigation shifted violently. Why would Susan's DNA appear on Melissa's abandoned belongings? Did she help stage the scene? Did she know more than anyone imagined? Or had Daniel transferred evidence unknowingly through shared household contact years earlier? Mercer returned to Susan, immediately demanding answers. This time she broke completely, crying uncontrollably inside the interrogation room. Susan finally admitted Daniel came home late the night Melissa disappeared drenched in rain and behaving strangely. She noticed mud across his boots, smelled alcohol and motor oil strongly on his clothes. Hours later, after Daniel fell asleep, Susan discovered Melissa's purse hidden beneath old blankets inside the garage. She panicked, terrified police might somehow connect the evidence to her family. Susan drove the purse into rural farmland before abandoning it beside the access road, where authorities later discovered it. Mercer felt the room spin around him. For 22 years, one of the investigation's most important crime scene clues had been manipulated secretly by the suspect's own wife. Susan insisted she never saw Melissa herself, never knew whether the girl remained alive, but deep down, she always suspected something horrifying happened that night. "Why didn't you go to police?" Mercer asked. Susan stared at him with hollow eyes. "Because I was afraid he'd kill me too." The confession exploded the case wide open. Obstruction charges followed immediately. Prosecutors prepared murder warrants targeting Daniel Hargrove aggressively at last. News coverage intensified nationwide. Cedar Falls descended into chaos as residents realized the truth may have hidden inside the community, for decades protected by fear, silence, and manipulation. But before police could arrest Daniel Hargrove officially, he vanished. And for the first time since Melissa Grant disappeared into Stormback in 1987, investigators believed they were no longer hunting just a suspect. They were hunting a predator desperate enough to run. Daniel Hargrove disappeared the same way Melissa Grant had vanished 22 years earlier. No warning, no goodbye, just absence. Police arrived at his house before dawn, with arrest warrants ready. Lights flashing silently across wet pavement, while neighbors gathered behind curtains watching shadows move through the rain. But the house was empty. Front door unlocked. Television still running softly in the living room. Half-finished coffee sitting cold beside the sink. It looked less like a planned escape and more like someone interrupted ordinary life mid-motion. Then officers discovered the garage. Mercer stepped inside first. The smell hit him immediately. Bleach, gasoline, wet concrete. Industrial fans roared loudly near the rear wall, while rainwater dripped through the open side entrance onto the floor below. Tools lay scattered everywhere, as if someone searched frantically for something before leaving. One detective noticed fresh burn marks inside a steel drum near the workbench. Forensic teams moved in quickly. What they recovered turned the investigation into a national manhunt overnight. Fragments of burned photographs, partially melted identification cards belonging to women unrelated to Cedar Falls, jewelry, a rusted bracelet matching one worn by Rachel Whitmore before her disappearance in 1991. And hidden beneath loose floor panels near the furnace, investigators uncovered a locked metal case containing dozens of cassette tapes carefully labeled by date. The oldest tape read, October 1987. Mercer felt cold staring at it. The station sealed itself completely while technicians prepared audio equipment in an evidence room crowded with detectives and federal agents. Nobody spoke much. The atmosphere felt suffocating, heavy with a sense that something monstrous waited inside those recordings. Mercer pressed play. Static crackle first, then breathing. Slow, controlled. A man's voice emerged softly through background noise. "She keeps crying." Silence followed for several seconds. Then another sound appeared. A girl, barely audible, terrified. Mercer stopped the tape immediately. The room froze. Nobody moved. Some detectives later admitted they physically could not continue listening without leaving the room first. The recordings appear to document abductions, hours of them, different dates, different victims, fragmented conversations buried beneath static and mechanical humming, noises investigators struggled identifying. And one tape, recorded only days after Melissa Grant disappeared, included a female voice repeatedly begging to go home. For the first time in the entire investigation, Mercer truly believed Melissa might have survived the initial abduction for some period afterward. That possibility devastated everyone, because it meant she suffered, alone, hidden somewhere, while Cedar Falls searched desperately through storms and fields, believing time itself might still save her. Federal authorities joined the case immediately. Behavioral profilers examined the recordings, while search teams flooded locations connected to Daniel Hargrove across Iowa and neighboring states. The media frenzy became uncontrollable. Cable networks ran nonstop coverage comparing Hargrove to infamous serial predators throughout American criminal history. Reporters camped permanently outside the police station. Helicopters circle above Cedar Falls day and night. Meanwhile, Daniel Hargrove remained missing. His abandoned pickup truck surfaced 2 days later beside a Forest Service road near the Minnesota border. Inside, investigators found camping supplies, cash, multiple fake identification cards, and a map marked with isolated rural cabins stretching across 3 states. Mercer studied the map for hours. One location stood out immediately: an abandoned hunting property near Blackwater Lake, Wisconsin. The cabin belonged to a deceased relative of Hargrove's father and had not officially changed ownership in years. Local records showed almost no recent activity there. Isolated woods surrounded the structure for miles. Perfect hiding territory. A tactical team moved in before sunrise under freezing fog. Officers approached quietly through dense trees while helicopters waited farther south to avoid alerting anyone nearby. Mercer rode with the lead convoy despite direct orders to remain behind. He no longer cared about protocol. The cabin appeared abandoned initially. Rotting wood, broken windows, no visible vehicles. But once officers forced entry, they realized someone had occupied the structure recently. Food wrappers, fresh blankets, candles still warm. And deep inside a locked basement room, investigators discovered something that permanently changed the emotional weight of the case. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Women. Teenagers. Mostly candid images taken secretly in parking lots, sidewalks, shopping centers, diners. Some victims were later identified as known missing persons from across the Midwest. Others remained unknown entirely. The walls themselves looked like a shrine constructed from obsession and surveillance stretching over decades. At the center hung a single enlarged photograph of Melissa Grant. Pinned beneath it was a handwritten sentence. She smiled at the wrong person. Mercer reportedly stood staring at the image for nearly a full minute, unable to breathe normally. Then officers discovered the tapes. More recordings, more voices, more evidence suggesting Daniel Hargrove hunted women systematically for years while maintaining the image of an ordinary mechanic and family man back in Cedar Falls. But no bodies. Still no Melissa. That absence tormented Mercer more than anything else. Then one officer searching the basement noticed scratch marks along the concrete floor beneath old shelving units. The team moved the shelves aside, revealing a hidden trapdoor partially concealed under carpeting and dust. The smell rising from below stopped everyone instantly. Human decomposition. Search crews descended carefully into the underground chamber beneath the cabin, while forensic photographers documented every inch. What they found there horrified even veteran homicide investigators. A concealed room, soundproofed crudely with insulation and plywood, chains attached to wall anchors, women's clothing folded neatly inside plastic containers, and buried beneath loose dirt flooring, skeletal remains, multiple sets. The scene triggered immediate federal intervention. Specialists arrived from multiple agencies, while Blackwater Lake transformed into one of the largest excavation sites in regional criminal history. News outlets compared the discovery to notorious serial murder cases nationwide. Mercer barely slept during those days. Every recovered fragment felt emotionally overwhelming because the scale of Hargrove's hidden life now appeared far darker than anyone imagined. This was no impulsive predator acting occasionally. Investigators increasingly believe Daniel Hargrove operated methodically for years, selecting victims carefully while moving unnoticed through ordinary suburban routines. Yet one question remained unanswered. Where was he now? The manhunt intensified across state lines. Border alerts expanded. Tips flooded call centers hourly. Some sightings proved ridiculous. Truck stop workers claiming Hargrove crossed into Canada, hunters reporting armed men hiding in forests, motel clerks swearing they recognized him from television. Most were false. Then came the confirmed sighting. A gas station security camera in northern Wisconsin captured footage of a man strongly resembling Daniel Hargrove purchasing fuel and supplies roughly 80 miles from Blackwater Lake. Timestamp, 23 hours earlier. He was still moving. Still ahead. Mercer joined the tracking teams personally despite exhaustion hollowing him physically. Rain mixed with melting snow across endless forest roads, while officers searched abandoned campsites and hunting cabins around the clock. Every hour increased danger. Desperate fugitives cornered by exposure often become unpredictable, violent, suicidal. And Mercer knew Hargrove understood police tactics intimately by now, because for 22 years, the predator survived through patience, control, preparation. But then another discovery surfaced back at Blackwater Lake that changed the emotional direction of the case entirely. Forensic analysts identified one set of remains recovered beneath the hidden chamber as Rachel Whitmore. Another belonged to a missing college student from Minnesota. A third remained unidentified. Melissa Grant was not among them. Mercer felt conflicting emotions collide instantly. Relief, confusion, terror. If Melissa was not buried beneath the cabin, where had she gone? And why did Hargrove preserve evidence connected to her more obsessively than any other victim? The answer arrived unexpectedly through the final cassette tape recovered from the Wisconsin property. Label, "Don't Trust Pretty Smiles." The recording began with static. Then Melissa's voice emerged clearly for the first time in 22 years. Alive, crying softly somewhere in darkness. And moments later, the tape captured a sentence that sent ice through every investigator listening. He said if I behave, maybe he'll let me go. The room went completely silent after Melissa Grant's voice faded from the cassette tape. No one moved. No one spoke. The sound quality was terrible, static crackling constantly beneath distant mechanical humming, but there was no mistaking the fear in her voice. Detectives who spent decades staring at Melissa's photographs suddenly heard her alive again for the first time since 1987, crying softly, breathing unevenly, sounding young, vulnerable, human, not a cold case, not a newspaper headline. A terrified 17-year-old girl, trapped somewhere with a predator who controlled every second of her existence. Mercer replayed the recording repeatedly while forensic audio specialists cleaned background noise frame by frame. Each pass revealed tiny details investigators hoped might expose a location where Melissa had been held. Water dripping, metal vibrations, a train horn far in the distance. At one point, a dog barking faintly somewhere outside. Then Daniel Hargrove's voice emerged. Calm, controlled, almost gentle. You keep acting smart, nobody's going home. The sentence made several investigators physically uncomfortable. There was no rage in his tone, no chaos, only patience. The terrifying calm of a man who viewed control as normal. Behavioral profilers immediately developed a theory that changed the investigation again. Melissa was not killed immediately after the abduction. She had been held captive, maybe for days, possibly longer. And if Hargrove kept victims alive temporarily before murdering them, investigators feared there could be additional undiscovered crime scenes scattered across multiple states. The FBI expanded excavation efforts around Blackwater Lake, while Mercer focused obsessively on one question. Why was Melissa different? Hargrove preserved more material connected to her than any other victim. Secret photographs, audio recordings, newspaper archives stretching decades. Investigators believe Melissa represented something psychologically significant to him beyond random selection. Maybe she resisted. Maybe she reminded him of someone. Or maybe, horrifyingly, she survived longer than the others. The theory haunted Mercer constantly. Because if Melissa endured captivity for days or weeks, every failed search effort back in 1987 became even more tragic. While Cedar Falls held candlelight vigils and volunteers walked freezing cornfield with flashlights, she may have been alive somewhere nearby praying someone would find her first. Then forensic analysts uncovered another breakthrough hidden inside the tape. Background radio audio, extremely faint. After enhancement, technicians isolated fragments of a weather broadcast mentioning severe flooding near the Mississippi River region. The specific storm reference occurred on October 24th, 1987, nearly 3 weeks after Melissa disappeared. Mercer stared at the timeline in disbelief. Melissa was alive at least 19 days after the abduction. The revelation devastated Cedar Falls. National media exploded instantly once the information leaked. Former volunteers who joined the original searches gave emotional interviews describing guilt that never fully disappeared. Melissa's mother reportedly collapsed again after hearing the update. Friends who attended high school with Melissa struggled publicly with a horrifying realization that while they attended classes and tried rebuilding normal routines, she may have still been waiting desperately for rescue somewhere in darkness. Mercer took the revelation personally. For 22 years, he imagined Melissa died quickly. Brutally, yes, but quickly. The tapes destroyed that assumption completely. Now, every memory from the original investigation replayed differently inside his mind. Every mislead, every failed search radius, every overlooked clue. Time became the enemy again. Except now it was too late to save her. Meanwhile, Daniel Hargrove continued disappearing deeper into wilderness territory across northern Wisconsin. Tracking teams discovered abandoned campsites containing food wrappers and burned clothing, evidence suggesting he monitored news coverage constantly while moving between isolated areas. One campsite revealed recent newspaper clippings discussing Melissa Grant specifically. Even while fleeing, he remained obsessed with her. Then came a phone call. Mercer answered personally. Static crackled heavily before Hargrove finally spoke. "You still think this was about killing?" Mercer felt his pulse spike instantly. "Where's Melissa?" Soft laughter answered. "You spent 20 years looking in graves." The line disconnected. Investigators traced a call to a stolen prepaid phone activated briefly near a remote highway rest stop. Tactical teams rushed the location immediately, but arrived too late. Witnesses reported seeing a middle-aged man driving a dark SUV heading north roughly 40 minutes earlier. Mercer couldn't stop replaying the sentence afterward. "You spent 20 years looking in graves." The wording disturbed him deeply because it implied Melissa's fate involved something beyond murder alone. Some investigators theorized Hargrove referred psychologically to captivity, possession, or emotional control. Others feared he might be hinting at undiscovered victims still alive at some point long after abduction. Mercer developed another theory entirely. What if Melissa was never buried because Hargrove kept returning to her remains somehow? The possibility sounded irrational initially, until forensic teams re-examined photographs recovered from the Wisconsin cabin. One image showed a remote lakeside property partially hidden by dense pine forest. At first glance, it looked unimportant. But Mercer noticed something in the background, a weathered red water tower. He recognized it instantly. The tower stood near a forgotten fishing community, abandoned gradually throughout the 1990s after industrial contamination destroyed local tourism. The area sat nearly 70 miles east of Blackwater Lake and contained dozens of collapsing cabins surrounded by swamp and woodland. Perfect isolation. Mercer assembled a search operation immediately. Rain hammered northern Wisconsin the night teams entered the abandoned community. Most structures appeared rotted beyond use. Broken windows, mold-covered walls, sagging roofs collapsing inward from years of neglect. But deep in the back corner of the settlement, officers discovered one cabin recently occupied. Generator fuel, fresh canned food, blankets, and inside the bedroom, pinned carefully above a rusted bed frame, another photograph of Melissa Grant. This one looked different, older, more personal. Melissa sat wrapped in a blanket, staring toward the camera with hollow, exhausted eyes. Her hair appeared shorter, face thinner, bruises visible near one wrist. Forensic experts estimated the photograph was taken weeks, possibly months, after her disappearance. Mercer felt physically sick holding it, because the image confirmed every nightmare investigators feared. Melissa had survived captivity far longer than anyone imagined. The cabin search uncovered additional horrors. Handcuffs bolted beneath furniture, soundproofing hidden inside walls, medical supplies, women's clothing separated carefully into labeled plastic bins. And in the crawl space beneath the floorboards, detectives found a small cassette recorder wrapped in cloth. Mercer played it immediately despite warnings from forensic teams. Melissa's voice emerged again. Weak, tired, different now. Not panicked anymore. Defeated. He said, "Nobody's searching anymore," she whispered softly. He said, "My family stopped looking." Mercer lowered his head into his hands. Several officers left the room entirely afterward, unable to continue listening. Then, near the end of the recording, another voice appeared unexpectedly. A woman, older than Melissa, crying somewhere nearby. The discovery stunned investigators because until that moment, they believed Hargrove operated alone with isolated victims one at a time. Now it appeared multiple captives may have existed simultaneously. The implications became horrifying instantly. How many women had disappeared into these hidden locations over the years? How many recordings still waited undiscovered? And where exactly was Daniel Hargrove heading now? That answer arrived sooner than anyone expected. At 3:11 a.m., a state trooper spotted a stolen SUV matching descriptions tied to Hargrove speeding along a rain-soaked highway near the Michigan border. The pursuit exploded violently across empty roads while helicopters scrambled overhead through heavy fog. Then suddenly the SUV swerved sharply off the highway, straight toward dense forest, and vanished into darkness before officers could stop him. The forest swallowed Daniel Hargrove whole. By the time officers reached the point where the stolen SUV crashed through roadside barriers and disappeared into darkness, rain had already erased most visible tracks. Flashlights cut through fog, while helicopters circled overhead struggling to see beneath the dense canopy stretching endlessly across the Michigan wilderness. The scene looked chaotic. Broken branches, deep tire grooves slicing into mud, steam rising from soaked engine parts. But there was no sign of Hargrove anywhere. The SUV sat abandoned roughly 200 yards inside the woods. Driver's door open, engine still warm. Blood smeared faintly across the steering wheel. Mercer arrived just before dawn and immediately sensed something wrong. Predators on the run typically keep moving after abandoning vehicles. Hargrove had years of hunting experience, survival knowledge, and a massive head start through isolated terrain. But the SUV contained supplies he normally would never leave behind voluntarily. Weapons, food, dry clothing, cash. He exited fast. Maybe injured, maybe desperate, or maybe because something else waited deeper inside those woods. Tracking dogs picked up scent trails almost immediately leading north through heavy pine growth toward abandoned mining territory miles away from major roads. Search teams followed cautiously, while rain continued hammering the landscape hard enough to drown ordinary sound. Mercer moved with the lead group, despite exhaustion burning behind his eyes like acid. Every instinct told him this chase was approaching its end. The question was what kind of ending waited out there. Then officers discovered a cabin. Another one, hidden beside a narrow river surrounded by rotting trees and collapsed fencing. The structure barely looked visible beneath overgrowth. Windows covered with boards, rusted chimney leaning sideways. No electricity, no visible signs of occupancy from a distance, but smoke drifted faintly from the rear. Tactical teams surrounded the property carefully, weapons raised, silence everywhere except rainwater rushing through nearby rocks. Mercer approached with his pulse hammering violently inside his chest. He had imagined confronting Daniel Hargrove for over 20 years. Thousands of scenarios, thousands of endings. None prepared him for the reality of standing outside the door where the man might finally be cornered. Then a voice called from inside. "You came alone?" Mercer froze instantly. Hargrove sounded calm again. Too calm. Negotiators moved forward immediately, while snipers positioned around the tree line. But Mercer barely heard instructions anymore. Adrenaline drowned everything else out. "Daniel," Mercer shouted, "come outside." Soft laughter echoed faintly from inside the cabin. "You still don't understand her." Mercer gripped his weapon tighter. "Where's Melissa?" Several seconds passed. Then Hargrove answered quietly. "She stopped being Melissa a long time ago." The sentence sent ice through every officer present. Negotiators attempted continuing communication carefully, but Hargrove kept redirecting the conversation toward Melissa obsessively. He described her as special, different, the only one who listened. The language disturbed behavioral profilers, monitoring remotely because it suggested deep psychological fixation far beyond ordinary predatory violence. Then came the gunshot. Single blast. Everyone moved instantly. Tactical teams breached the cabin within seconds while Mercer forced his way through the front entrance behind them. Dust and smoke filled the narrow interior. Furniture overturned. Candle wax dripping across floors. The smell of mildew and gunpowder mixing together in suffocating waves. Daniel Hargrove sat slumped against the far wall, blood spreading across his chest. The shotgun beside him still smoking faintly. Medics rushed forward immediately, but Mercer already knew it was over. After 22 years of pursuit, Daniel Hargrove died without trial, without confession, without formally answering for the nightmare he left behind. But the cabin held answers of its own. Investigators discovered hidden compartments throughout the structure containing journals, photographs, maps, audio recordings, and personal belongings connected to at least 9 missing women across 4 states. Some victims were previously unidentified entirely. Others linked to cold cases dating back to the late 1980s. And inside a locked trunk beneath the bed, Mercer found the final journal. The pages looked chaotic compared to earlier writings. Handwriting unstable. Sentences fragmented. Paranoia bleeding through every line. They keep saying dead. They never understood. She changed everything. Then Mercer reached the final entries. October 1987. The writing became more detailed, more emotional. According to Hargrove's journal, Melissa fought him constantly after the abduction, tried escaping repeatedly, refused eating for days, threatened to expose him if released. Yet strangely, the entries described admiration alongside rage. Hargrove wrote about Melissa as though she challenged some fantasy he constructed inside his mind. She still believed people were coming. She kept talking about home. She ruined the silence. Mercer read for hours, searching desperately for one detail above all others. What happened to her? The answer finally appeared near the final pages. She got sick after the flooding. Wouldn't stop coughing. I tried moving her north. She died before sunrise. Mercer stared at the sentence, unable to breathe properly. No dramatic confession. No detailed murder count. Just one horrifying line buried between obsessive rambling thoughts. She died before sunrise. The journal claimed Hargrove buried Melissa near an old riverside church somewhere in northern Wisconsin after transporting her across state lines during heavy storms weeks after the original abduction. Search teams mobilized immediately. And for 3 straight days, investigators combed abandoned church properties stretching across remote woodland regions, while national media followed every development obsessively. The country watched, hoping the search might finally bring Melissa Grant home after 22 years. Then cadaver dogs alerted near the ruins of St. Anne's Mission Church. The structure sat isolated beside marshland nearly abandoned since the early 1970s. Cracked stained glass windows, collapsing roof beams, flooded cemetery plots swallowed by weeds and standing water. Investigators excavated near the riverbank behind the church, where disturbed soil patterns suggested old burial activity. Mercer stood nearby beneath gray skies as forensic teams uncovered skeletal remains wrapped in deteriorated blankets nearly 6 feet underground. Beside the remains sat a necklace, small silver cross. Melissa Grant wore one identical the night she disappeared. The silence afterward felt unbearable. 22 years. Search parties. False leads. Endless fear. And finally Melissa Grant came home buried beneath forgotten earth, beside a ruined church no one visited anymore. Forensic confirmation arrived 48 hours later. The remains belonged to Melissa. News spread across America instantly. Crowds gathered outside the Grant family home, leaving flowers, candles, handwritten notes. Former classmates cried during television interviews, recalling memories frozen since high school. Cedar Falls held an emergency church vigil attended by thousands despite freezing rain pouring through the streets. Mercer did not attend. Instead, he sat alone inside his apartment staring at Melissa's recovered necklace resting inside an evidence photograph on the table. He should have felt relief, closure, victory, but all he felt was exhaustion. Because Melissa survived longer than anyone knew. Because Daniel Hargrove stole decades from countless families while living behind smiles and ordinary routines. And because somewhere deep inside Mercer's mind, one final detail still refused settling peacefully. The recordings recovered from the cabins included more female voices than identified victims, which meant one terrifying possibility still remained. Daniel Hargrove may not have worked alone. Melissa Grant's funeral became the largest gathering Cedar Falls had witnessed in generations. People lined sidewalks for blocks beneath freezing rain, while church bells echoed slowly across town. Former classmates traveled from different states. Retired detectives returned quietly without uniforms. Reporters stood behind barricades, broadcasting live, beside crowds, holding candles against the wind. For a few hours, the entire community seemed suspended between grief and relief, trapped in the strange emotional aftermath that follows when a nightmare finally receives a name, a face, and a grave. 22 years earlier, Melissa disappeared into darkness. Now she came home inside a white coffin, carried through streets filled with people who never stopped remembering her. Mercer watched from the back of the church, without speaking to anyone. The exhaustion inside him no longer felt temporary. It felt permanent, carved into his bones after decades chasing Daniel Hargrove through dead ends, false hope, and buried horrors. Other officers congratulated him quietly in hallways afterward. Newspapers called him the detective who refused to quit. Television commentators described the case as one of the most shocking cold case breakthroughs in modern American history. Mercer hated every headline, because none of it changed what happened. Melissa still died terrified and alone hundreds of miles from home while her family waited beside telephones praying she might walk through the door again. And worse, the investigation still felt unfinished. The female voices on the tapes continued haunting him. Forensic analysts identified 9 victims directly connected to Hargrove through remains, belongings, or recordings. But at least 13 separate voices appeared across the cassette collection. Some recordings were too degraded for certainty. Others captured only fragments, crying, whispering, coughing, terrified breathing somewhere in darkness. Unidentified women, unknown fates, possibly undiscovered graves. The scale of Hargrove's crimes already horrified the country, but Mercer feared the truth stretched further still. Then another detail surfaced from the evidence recovered inside the Michigan cabin. A receipt, dated February 1994. Location, Cedar Falls Pharmacy. Purchased items included antibiotics, gauze, and women's clothing. The discovery disturbed Mercer immediately because investigators believed Hargrove operated primarily outside Cedar Falls after Melissa disappeared. Yet the receipt suggested he continued moving between hidden locations and ordinary community life seamlessly for years, maybe even transporting victims through town unnoticed. Mercer reopened the tapes again obsessively, this time focusing not on victims, but background sounds. One recording captured a train horn pattern matching freight routes running through northern Iowa during the early 1990s. Another included church bells ringing every hour. A third contained fragments of radio advertisements traced eventually to local stations broadcasting around Cedar Falls. The implication became terrifying. Some victims may have been held close to town itself, possibly within miles of ordinary neighborhoods where families slept peacefully, believing danger existed somewhere far away. Search teams returned to properties connected remotely to Hargrove once more. Garages, storage units, hunting grounds, abandoned farm structures. The operation grew so large federal agencies coordinated excavation sites across multiple counties simultaneously. Then investigators discovered the bunker, hidden beneath an abandoned machine shed outside Cedar Falls. The underground structure remained invisible from the surface, except for a ventilation pipe concealed beneath dead brush. A utility worker repairing storm damage noticed unusual electrical wiring near the property and contacted police after recognizing media coverage surrounding Hargrove. Mercer arrived during excavation efforts just after sunrise. The bunker entrance opened into narrow concrete stairs descending nearly 15 feet underground. Mold coated the walls. Moisture dripped steadily through rusted pipes overhead. The deeper investigators moved inside, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Then they reached the final room. Several detectives stopped walking entirely. The chamber looked preserved in time. A bed bolted to the floor. Medical restraints. Shelves stocked with food expired decades earlier. Women's clothing folded neatly inside plastic bins. And scratched across the concrete wall repeatedly in fading letters. Please don't leave me here. Mercer felt physically ill. Forensic teams worked carefully through the underground space while psychologists documented signs of prolonged captivity. Hair samples, fibers, fingerprints, biological evidence degraded by time, but still partially recoverable through modern technology. Then they found the photographs. Polaroids scattered inside waterproof containers, showing unidentified women seated inside the bunker over different years. Some looked drugged, others terrified. One image captured a young brunette staring directly into the camera with bruises across her neck. Mercer recognized her immediately from old missing person bulletins. Emily Voss, disappeared in 1994. Never found. Until now. The bunker transformed the case again overnight. Media coverage exploded internationally. Analysts compared Hargrove to some of the most notorious serial predators in criminal history. Public anger intensified toward law enforcement failures during the 1980s and 1990s, when multiple disappearances remained disconnected across state lines. Families of missing women flooded hotlines begging investigators to examine old cases potentially linked to Hargrove. And through all of it, Mercer kept returning mentally to one horrifying possibility. How did Hargrove maintain these locations for decades without help? The logistics no longer made sense for one man operating entirely alone, transporting victims, maintaining hidden sites, avoiding detection across multiple states while preserving ordinary family routines. Investigators increasingly questioned whether someone assisted him knowingly or unknowingly throughout portions of the crimes. Then Susan Hargrove requested another meeting. This time she looked worse than ever. Exhausted, broken. The media destroyed her publicly after revelations surrounding Melissa's purse and years of silence. Some residents viewed her as another victim trapped under psychological abuse. Others believed she protected a monster willingly for decades. Susan no longer defended herself. She simply looked tired of carrying secrets. During the interview, Mercer finally asked directly, "Did Daniel ever work with anyone?" Susan hesitated for a long time, then slowly nodded once. "There was another man," she whispered. The room went silent instantly. Susan explained Daniel occasionally disappeared on hunting trips with an old friend named Victor Hale during the late 1980s and early 1990s. She remembered Victor because Daniel acted differently around him, more relaxed, more reckless. The two men shared isolated cabins, drank heavily together, and spoke privately for hours behind closed doors. Then Victor vanished from Cedar Falls suddenly in 1995. No goodbye, no explanation. Most people assumed he relocated. Mercer dug into the records immediately. Victor Hale, former truck driver, minor criminal history involving assault and burglary, owner of rural property less than 10 miles from the underground bunker. And one final detail sent shockwaves through the investigation. Victor Hale's DNA partially matched biological evidence recovered beside Rachel Whitmore's remains years earlier. The unidentified male profile investigators believed disproved Hargrove's involvement suddenly became something far more terrifying instead. Not another killer. En complice. Mercer felt cold realizing what it meant. For 22 years, investigators hunted one predator, while another possibly escaped entirely unnoticed. Then a new report arrived from federal analysts examining old financial records tied to Victor Hale. Recent activity appeared on one dormant account, 2 withdrawals, made less than 3 weeks earlier. Someone using Victor Hale's identity might still be alive. And somewhere beyond the endless media coverage, memorial vigils, and recovered graves, Mercer suddenly understood the nightmare surrounding Melissa Grant and the other missing women was not fully over yet, because another ghost from Cedar Falls had just stepped back into the light. Rain fell over Cedar Falls, and Night Owl and Mercer reopened the Victor Hale file. Not heavy rain, just the slow, cold kind that settles across empty streets after midnight and makes every reflection look haunted. The town felt quieter now compared to the chaos following Daniel Hargrove's death. News vans disappeared gradually. Memorial candles outside the Grant family home melted into puddles and vanished. People returned to work. Children went back to school. Restaurants reopened normally. But beneath the surface, fear never fully left. Because the deeper investigators dug into Hargrove's hidden world, the more impossible it became to believe he acted completely alone. Victor Hale's fingerprints surfaced repeatedly throughout newly examined evidence. Old beer bottles recovered from Blackwater Lake, partial prints inside the underground bunker, tire tracks matching vehicles registered under Hale's name near 2 disappearance sites from the early 1990s. Piece by piece, the image became horrifyingly clear. Daniel Hargrove was not simply a lone predator. He had a witness, a helper, possibly even a partner. And unlike Hargrove, Victor Hale never died inside a cabin surrounded by police. He vanished. That fact poisoned Mercer's thoughts constantly. The financial activity connected to Hale's dormant account originated from a tiny town in northern Montana. Surveillance footage from the bank proved grainy and incomplete, but analysts identified an older male wearing sunglasses and a hunting jacket withdrawing cash under Hale's identity less than a month earlier. Alive. After all these years, Victor Hale might still be out there breathing freely while families buried daughters connected to crimes he possibly helped conceal. Federal authorities launched another manhunt immediately. Quiet this time. Controlled. Investigators feared media leaks might drive Hale underground permanently if he learned police connected him to the growing list of victims. Mercer joined the task force despite pressure from superiors to step back after decades on the case. He refused, because the closer the investigation moved towards final answers, the more personal it became. Melissa Grant haunted him constantly now, not the smiling school photograph broadcast on television for years. The voice, that was what destroyed him. He said, "If I behave, maybe he'll let me go." Mercer heard the sentence in his sleep. He imagined Melissa trapped in darkness, still believing rescue might come before morning. He imagined every failed search party passing unknowingly within miles while she waited somewhere hidden underground listening to storms outside. And now another man connected to that nightmare might still be alive. The Montana operation moved fast. Federal agents traced recent supply purchases tied to Hale's alias toward isolated woodland property outside Bitterroot Valley. Remote, mountainous, perfect territory for someone who spent decades surviving unnoticed. Mercer arrived with tactical teams just before dawn. The cabin stood alone beside dense pine forest under gray skies heavy with snow clouds. Smoke drifted from the chimney faintly, lights visible through curtains. Occupied. Agents surrounded the property silently, while snipers positioned themselves along the ridge above. Mercer watched through binoculars as movement crossed one of the cabin windows briefly. An old man, thinner than expected, gray beard, but unmistakably Victor Hale. For several seconds, Mercer simply stared. After 23 years, one of the last living shadows connected to Melissa Grant stood less than 100 yards away. Then everything exploded at once. A dog barked violently inside the cabin. Victor looked toward the window, saw movement, and immediately reached for a rifle. Federal agents breached within seconds while gunfire shattered through trees. Glass exploded outward. Officers screamed commands over the chaos. Mercer ran with the second entry team through blowing snow, while bullets tore splinters from nearby fencing. The firefight lasted less than a minute. Victor Hale survived exactly 43 seconds after realizing police found him. When Mercer entered the cabin, Hale lay bleeding heavily beside an overturned table, rifle still clutched weakly in his hands. Agents secured the room while medics moved forward, but Victor pushed one of them away violently. "No hospitals," he rasped. Mercer knelt beside him. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Victor laughed weakly through blood. "Took you long enough." Mercer's voice stayed cold. "What happened to Melissa Grant?" Victor closed his eyes briefly. Snow blew through shattered windows across the floorboards while agents searched the cabin around them. Finally, Victor whispered, "Danny never planned for her to last that long." Mercer felt his chest tighten instantly. "Tell me where she was held." Victor coughed blood onto his sleeve. "Different places. Cabins mostly. Storm drains once. Underground spots." His breathing grew weaker. He liked moving them when police searched nearby. "How many victims?" Victor stared toward the ceiling for several seconds, then answered softly, "More than you found." The words hit Mercer like a hammer. More graves, more missing women, more families who still had no idea what truly happened. Mercer leaned closer. "Did you kill them too?" Victor's expression changed strangely then. Not anger, not fear, regret. "We stopped seeing them as people after a while." Silence filled the cabin. Outside, snow continued falling through endless pine trees, while agents photographed evidence scattered across tables and shelves. Mercer realized suddenly that this was probably the closest thing to a confession anyone would ever receive. Then Victor said something else. Something that would haunt Mercer for the rest of his life. She kept talking about her mother. Mercer froze. Victor's eyes looked distant now. Melissa, even near the end. He swallowed painfully. She thought somebody was still coming for her. The room felt impossibly quiet. Mercer wanted to hate the man bleeding in front of him, wanted rage, wanted satisfaction, but all he felt was crushing exhaustion and grief. So deep it hollowed everything else away. Victor Hale died 6 minutes later before formal interrogation could begin, and with him died countless details investigators would never fully recover. The search of the Montana cabin uncovered maps, coded journals, old photographs, and partial identifiers connected to at least 7 additional unsolved disappearances across the Midwest. Excavation teams spent the next 2 years locating burial sites hidden near abandoned properties stretching across 3 states. Some victims were identified, others remained unknown. But Melissa Grant became the face people remembered most, because her story captured something terrifyingly human beneath all the headlines and forensic horror. She was not wandering dangerous highways, not involved with criminal worlds. She was an ordinary teenager, leaving work during a storm, believing she would go home afterward. And that was what frightened America most. Monsters did not always hide in darkness. Sometimes they lived next door for decades, smiling at neighbors, coaching Little League, repairing cars, waving politely from suburban driveways while unimaginable violence rotted beneath carefully constructed normality. Years later, long after the investigations officially closed, Alan Mercer visited Melissa's grave alone one final time. The cemetery overlooked quiet hills outside Cedar Falls, where wind moved softly through trees under fading evening light. Fresh flowers rested beside the headstone left by strangers who still remember her story decades later. Mercer stood silently for several minutes. Older now, retired, carrying more ghosts than victories. Then he placed a small silver cross recovered beside Melissa's, remains gently against a stone before turning to leave. Behind him, the town of Cedar Falls glowed quietly beneath approaching darkness, looking peaceful again from a distance. But some places never truly forget what happened there. And somewhere inside old evidence rooms, faded cassette tapes still waited in sealed boxes, preserving the final terrified voices of girls who disappeared into storms believing someone would save them before morning came.